141. The Code of Prophecy. At last the color blocks in front of her steadied, though everything was still blurred, as if she were looking through a sheet of rough frosted glass. She couldn't make out details, only vague shapes of environment and movement. Two clumps of dark green melted into the forms of people. When they drew close, a repulsive, nauseating voice issued from them. The curse has been interrupted. The piece of the cursed object at the school has been destroyed, the taller one spat. The shorter figure, a woman, answered immediately. That Malfoy boy is unreliable. He can't even hide anything properly. We'll teach him a lesson next time he comes out, the man said. Don't kill him. He's still useful, the woman replied, her tone full of malice. In Hermione's vision, she looked like a shaking mass of rotten mud oozing outward. As long as that Dobby is still in our hands, he won't be able to play any tricks. This is the last favor old Malfoy left him. Hermione finally understood why Draco might cooperate with the Death Eaters. What do we do now? They're on guard. It'll be hard to get that boy to come out again. We need to lay low for a while. Make sure people in the castle aren't trying to use Draco as bait. What about Lord Voldemort's orders? The taller voice asked. Are you stupid? The woman snapped. We're working for him to share in the secret of eternal life, not to throw away our lives. You nearly got burned by the Wizengamot last time. Didn't you learn anything? The green blob representing her moved a few steps and stopped. At least wait until spring, when their guard relaxes. And we can't send the cursed object back in. We have to get it right this time. Get the Malfoy boy to lure him out. With a basilisk and the cursed object there, killing him will be as easy as turning our hands. But we should stay as far from the castle as possible. How about a portkey? I don't want to run into Dumbledore's luck. Oh, and that Hermione Granger. Trick her out and kill her too. Hermione sneered. They were persistent and evil, and they had danger-ass allies in Voldemort's basilisk to fall back on, power that should not be underestimated. The scene shifted. This time the image sharpened. She saw herself from above, as if floating high in the castle and looking down. Draco crept along a corridor, deliberately avoiding other students. He lingered on stairways and in corners until there was a clear moment, then slipped into the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. He took a dirty cloth doll from his robe, frowned briefly, then scanned the room left and right and chose a hiding place. It was a dried Grindelwald specimen, a withered display whose hooked claws tangled with models of water plants, looking like a sodden clump of debris no one wanted to touch. Not even Fred and George had bothered with it. It had probably been sitting there for ages. Draco shoved the doll deep into the water plants, fussed with the leaves until nothing could be seen from the outside, and then left. The colors dissolved, the scenery melted back into shimmering bubbles, and the vision receded. Hermione came fully back to herself, a small thrill running through her. If she could use this trick regularly, it would be an extraordinary way to gather information. She had to admit, having a seer's tool at hand was very convenient. You're back? Trelawney said, as if sensing her state. This is much easier to use than a crystal ball, but you can't throw them at people. That's not necessarily true, Hermione said, feeling lighter now that she'd seen something useful. You wouldn't want to see these bubbles burst. She turned as if to rush straight to the defense classroom, then paused. If you're interested, I'll take some time in the next few days to write down the Oracle Bubbles method and send it over. She trusted that Trelawney would be able to read it. After all, this was the wizarding world. Hermione had never liked Professor Trelawney much at first. The woman seemed too given to flair and show. When Hermione first met her, she had thought the professor lacked subtlety and restraint. For someone with the gift of prophecy, the most important qualities are not techniques for peering into fate, but reverence for it. Trelawney, Hermione had learned, came from a famous family of seers, and her name, Sybil, invoked the ancient priestesses said to be blessed by Apollo. The talent was vast, but Hermione suspected the professor was more inclined to rely on her gift than on hard work or careful judgment. Reckless and fanciful, Trelawney wanted to probe the unfathomable fate of the world with what Hermione imagined as a weak, barren soul, like an arrogant ant trying to challenge an elephant. In terms of outcome, it was almost a mercy that Trelawney's eyes had been spared total ruin. Wizards in general were alarmingly bold. Their joke suites could burn tongues, Quidditch could break necks, and parents let their children chase ghouls for sport. Hermione had heard that, in the days of the Ministry, third years could apply for time turners. She could hardly imagine giving a child a device capable of bending time and expecting everything to be safe just by listing a few rules. She was glad those dangerous contraptions had been destroyed long ago. Against that background, Trelawney's earnest, if flawed, attempts to ward against catastrophe seemed more sincere than most other precautions. Gradually, Hermione's prejudice softened. Perhaps the oracle bubbles could make the professor's visions clearer and less hazardous. It was near lights out in the corridors. During the Christmas holidays, the teachers were more lenient, patrols came later, and most transgressions were overlooked unless they were extreme. Hermione pushed open the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom door and found two figures inside she hadn't expected. "Draco, Madame Malfoy," she blurted. Narcissa stood holding the cursed doll, her face drained of color. She looked at Hermione with trembling lips and almost dropped the thing. Do the professors all know?" she stammered. "No, right now only Professor Lockhart and I know." Hermione shook her head. "Professor is already awake, and he begged me not to tell anyone else yet." She glanced at Draco behind Narcissa. He stood with his head down and looked lost. "And I haven't decided what to do about all of this yet." 142. Confession Bureau. Walking back to the school hospital, Hermione felt oddly conflicted. She hadn't expected Draco to turn away from his dark course so quickly, or to confess everything to his mother on Christmas night. She didn't want to make the decision for them, so she had brought Draco and Narcissa to the hospital. Better that they explain matters themselves. As they walked, steps echoed ahead, and Hermione stopped short. "Miss Granger, the lights are out. Why are you here alone?" It was Dumbledore. He and Barty Crouch Jr. were standing together in the corridor, looking at her with surprise. "I think I left my homework schedule in the hospital when I went to visit Professor Lockhart," Hermione said without missing a beat, keeping her expression neutral. "I'm going back to get it." "Oh, I think your professor will be very touched that there are still students thinking of him on Christmas," Dumbledore smiled. "But be quick. If your head of house catches you, I won't intercede." Hermione grinned. "So as long as I don't get caught, it's fine, right?" Barty Crouch Jr., standing nearby, regarded her with interest. "Is this the Miss Granger who subdued Lucius and pioneered Shining Stone magic?" He studied her. "Frankly, that sounds more Slytherin than Gryffindor. Interested in working at Malfoy Manor after graduation? We welcome talents like you," he added. "Will someone be thinking about my hands and tongue, or will I have to watch for assassination attempts by Dobby while I work?" Hermione asked, playing innocent. Barty laughed instead of taking offense. "I apologize for your experiences, but the invitation stands. If you're willing, I can promise at least a post equivalent to a director." As the public scion of the Crouch family, son of the current Malfoy constituency speaker, and director in the Department of Law Enforcement, his words were appropriate from his standpoint, a noble recruiting talent. Hermione's demonstrated strength and intelligence already surpassed many seventh-year graduates. Offering a prestigious position made sense, though Dumbledore intervened first. "All right, Barty Crouch Jr., she's only in her second year. You're a bit impatient," Dumbledore teased. "Let's go see the injured person you mentioned. But I still say, instead of putting your hopes on me, try your luck at Beauxbatons." They passed, then Dumbledore suddenly stopped and turned back. "Miss Granger, if you happen to see Hagrid, please ask him to fix the ceiling on the 4th floor. Lately, I keep feeling as if spiders are crawling inside." He winked. "I'll note it, Professor," Hermione replied calmly. When their footsteps faded, Hermione relaxed and dispelled the hurried disillusionment charm she'd cast. The two figures pressed against the wall, invisible to the passing professors, stayed perfectly still, not daring to breathe. A very fine disillusionment charm. No, better than one, Narcissa breathed once she could move. Thank goodness. If Dumbledore had asked, I wouldn't have known how to answer. She knew Dumbledore's legitimacy was formidable. Any slip could have been fatal. Draco was even more shaken. He realized now how crucial the brain closure technique had been. Death Eaters could probe minds at will, and even ordinary wizards could be dangerous. Secrets were hard to keep in the wizarding world. He began to regret not listening closely to Lockhart's lessons. "We need to hurry. If we're delayed, we might run into other professors," Hermione said quietly. They reached the hospital without further incident. It was Narcissa's night duty. Madame Pomfrey had already retired for the night, so they had privacy. Lockhart lay half-reclining in a bed. His color still looked off, but after finishing half a pie, he looked less feeble. He held a cloth doll cut open in his hands. Two small white finger joints peered out, crudely wrapped in black cotton stuffing. "My two sisters' finger bones," he said. "Perhaps the Hogwarts barrier's interference prevents them connecting to the rest, so the curse has been temporarily interrupted." He lifted his head and regarded Draco, who had been keeping his gaze down, gently. "Can you tell me why you suddenly regretted it?" Draco was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled a badge from his pocket. The silver-green serpent gleamed in the candlelight. Hermione recognized it, the Christmas gift she had given him. "The glory of Slytherin," Draco said, voice hoarse. "You told me once that how you gain glory matters more than the glory itself." He didn't go into the shameful private details of his change of heart. Broadly, it was the familiar story of a young man tormented inside who was finally moved by a rival friend's gesture. He hadn't dared tell any professor. He'd told only his mother. "I'm very pleased," Lockhart said, smiling. "At least there's one Slytherin who listened to my advice. It shows I wasn't a head of house for nothing." He turned to Hermione with a triumphant twinkle. "Well, little miss, are you satisfied with this outcome?" Hermione shrugged in a way that was non-committal. Narcissa, exhausted, spoke with apology. "I know this is a very serious crime. Draco almost killed you, and I beg your forgiveness. If the headmaster's here, Draco will be expelled. He won't survive on his own. There are too many people who'd want the Malfoy family to die out." She hurried on, words breaking with fatigue even as she forced herself steady. As a mother, this was what she had to do. Draco stayed bent, silent. After being caught by Hermione, he had prepared for his wand to be broken and for expulsion. "If there must be a punishment, I'll take Draco's place. Break my wand if you must. Trade my life." Narcissa bit her lip and said fiercely, "I know a curse that can link my life to his. If he suffers a fatal injury, mine will be consumed first." Draco snapped his head up. "Mom." He hadn't expected her to offer so steep a price. Last time they'd been here, it had been Lockhart asking Narcissa forgiveness for a mistake. In less than 2 months, the situation had inverted. Only Draco's posture remained the same. He was still the one at fault, still the one changed. "Oh, I don't think that's necessary," Lockhart said. He carefully took the 2 finger bones, wrapped them, and pocketed them. "If my falling into a coma once helped Draco grow this much, then perhaps it wasn't an unacceptable sacrifice." He looked at Hermione, testing. If she insisted on reporting to the headmasters, no one could stop her. "This matter isn't over." Hermione pouted stubbornly. "I used Sky Eye. The 2 Green Flame party members who threatened Draco still have Dobby, the one who tried to assassinate me. They're planning a second attempt after spring, and this time they'll include me." Lockhart frowned. "Dobby deserves to be punished. A house elf daring to harm a wizard is enough to call for the gravest sentence." Narcissa's voice hardened. "No need to worry whether he lives. He and Lucius, they deserve what they got." For Draco, she was now willing to give up anyone and anything. "It's the Caro siblings," Draco murmured. "Those 2 Green Flame party members are Amicus and Electo Caro. They acted on Voldemort's orders." "Those 2, Lockhart said, eyes closed as he pictured them. "The brother is strong enough, but not very clever. The sister, she's better at plots, and she knows legilimency. She's full of vicious ideas." "And the basilisk," Hermione added. "Voldemort knows the 2 of them couldn't handle you on their own. There's a curse aimed specifically at you, and a mutated basilisk that's lived for 1,000 years and swallowed who knows how many lives. All of it together. Probably not even a platinum knight could take it." "Ha!" Lockhart laughed, a bright, absurd sound. Even faced with danger, the man's theatrical virtual personality could still find something amusing. "Looks like we'll be busy in the second half of the term then." 143. Homecoming and Trial. two in one. Walking out of the school hospital again, Hermione felt this Christmas night was dragging on forever. Lockhart still needed time to recover, and Narcissa had gone to take her son back to the dormitory. The matter had ended ambiguously, smoothed over by the victim himself. Hermione, however, had been summoned to the Philosopher's Stone Hall on the fourth floor. When she said goodbye to Dumbledore, his parting words had seemed to carry an extra meaning. There were indeed spiders crawling on the fourth floor, but that wasn't something a patched-up ceiling would fix. She reached the entrance hall easily. Hagrid was fussing over a huge cauldron on a bathtub, boiling some kind of soup. Aragog looked on, drooling, while smaller spiders clicked noisily around him. Fang had been shoved aside, but came trotting over to rub himself against Hermione's legs. "Hey, Hermione," Hagrid said warmly. "Dumbledore's been expecting you. I'm making a Christmas supper for Aragog and his brood, but you can't eat any of it." Hermione managed to dislodge Fang, thanked Hagrid, and slipped through the side door into the heart of the castle. Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall were already there, seated in front of the Philosopher's Stone with a small round table between them, strewn with desserts and drinks from the feast. "You move fast," Hermione said. "I haven't even been in the hospital half an hour," Dumbledore chuckled. "Magic is convenient, isn't it? You've been running about all night. Perhaps you'd like a bite more of supper?" As she stepped toward the table, an elegant chair slid into place behind her, and a menu appeared on the tabletop. She read it aloud in amusement. "Ginger newt biscuits and hot cockroach milk." With a small pop, a plate of biscuits and a steaming cup of cockroach milk materialized. "Excellent choice," McGonagall remarked, taking a sip of eggnog. "You're getting used to the role of our junior school board member." "This is quite the Christmas surprise," Hermione said, shrugging. "Your ghost meal was impressive too," Dumbledore added with a fond expression. "I almost forgot the taste of food. Intentions matter more than cleverness." "As long as you like it. I thought you wouldn't have time tonight," McGonagall said. Both Dumbledore and she were still tying up troublesome loose ends even at this hour. "Barty Crouch Jr. seems to have been probing into the secret of my recovery," Dumbledore continued. "He suddenly lost interest in the Philosopher's Stone and fixated on that. Perhaps old Crouch's health isn't good either. He's fairly young. Was he cursed in some political conflict?" McGonagall frowned. "If he falls from his post, Malfoy Manor may slide back into chaos. These nobles were only just reaching a new balance." "No wonder you came back so quickly," Hermione said, popping a biscuit into her mouth. "But what do you think about Professor Lockhart's case?" She didn't expect her invisibility to have fooled Dumbledore. He seemed willing to let some things go unspoken, but he and McGonagall had likely already made some guesses. "Tell us everything," Dumbledore said. He could not eat, so he watched the two women with wistful eyes. "We were already suspicious when Lockhart fell asleep so suddenly, but Albus told me you brought a flustered Narcissa and Draco to the hospital," McGonagall said gravely. Though the parties involved had agreed to secrecy, they had underestimated the perceptiveness of two old headmasters. Hermione had initially been reluctant, but she decided to lay out the truth. She explained that Lockhart had a fractured personality, which made whatever curse affected him difficult to detect. She spared the painful private memories. Those were the professor's and Lockhart's wife's dignity to protect, but made clear that a twofold personality was at the heart of it. "Incredible. We let two Death Eaters and a basilisk follow us for so long," McGonagall breathed. "How did they hide a basilisk from our searches? Such a large, dark creature must have left traces." McGonagall's brows knitted. "And that child, Draco, Lucius's mark on him is too heavy." Draco's upbringing, the obsessive focus on family, blood, and glory, had pushed him far off the right course. "But he did come back to the right side, didn't he?" Dumbledore said optimistically. "Who hasn't erred when young? If he'd woken any later, I'm afraid Gilderoy might never have come round," McGonagall said sternly. She, like Hermione, didn't think the matter should be swept under the rug. "For the greater good, I helped Gellert think up that slogan," Dumbledore sighed, smiling ruefully, as ghosts do when remembering the past. "But enough of that." He looked at Hermione, who was leisurely eating her biscuit. "I called you for another reason. I'd like the opinion of our little school board member." Hermione straightened. Please don't put me on the spot. If you have something to say, say it. Dumbledore laughed. Minerva and I do not see eye to eye on this, but we think you might bring a different perspective. He glanced at McGonagall before adding, softly, I think perhaps it's time to move Hogwarts back to the Scottish Highlands. Hermione blinked. At first, the idea seemed sudden, but the more she thought about it, the more logical it was. The current Hogwarts, anchored by a stable Philosopher's Stone, could clear the lingering radiation from the old blast, and had become a central institution in the wizarding world. The perfume workshop's growing business could even underwrite much of the school's expenses. If the school had the confidence and resources, returning to its ancestral site had a certain rightness to it. Dumbledore, stubborn and nostalgic, would naturally favor restoring the school to where it belonged. Professor McGonagall, however, was unconvinced. She pursed her lips. The Highlands aren't what they were. There wasn't only one bomb dropped on Hogwarts. After we moved the school, the Muggles launched several more high-yield devices to eliminate any chance of rebuilding. Compared to Chernobyl or Rome or even Godric's Hollow, the original site is worse. Even with Hermione and the Philosopher's Stone helping to clear contamination, I worry. She left the sentence hanging. Hermione understood what she meant. If control of the stone ever failed at a critical moment, the entire castle would have nowhere safe to go. Besides, the area is occupied by werewolves, vampires, and mutated beasts from the Forbidden Forest, McGonagall continued. They've survived in high radiation for decades and will be harder to deal with than anything beyond it. There are also centaurs. Some say they've acquired forbidden powers. I don't oppose returning, McGonagall said carefully, but we may not be ready. We need war materials, an organized aerial force, enough trained wizards for defense, and supplies for post-war reconstruction. We have one castle and few powerful professors. Even if the day came, students should remain at home until these things are in place. And even then, Hermione interjected calmly, clearing pollution and driving away monsters won't end things. It will be a long, drawn-out tug of war. The Forbidden Forest once kept to a contract with Hogwarts. Its creatures didn't harm students. Now I fear that contract is broken. The forest, what is it now? A scorched expanse crawling with monsters? There's no need to worry about threats brave enough to show themselves or about the stone's stability. I can guarantee that a reliable power source would let us destroy overt threats, she went on. But what of the hidden ones? You cannot have 1,000 eyes on every student. Rather than asking if the school is ready, we should be asking if the students are ready, if the next generations of wizards can carry the burden ahead. Dumbledore and McGonagall exchanged a look. Hermione is right. The old contract with the forest may be void, McGonagall admitted. Dumbledore sighed. All right, if you both object— No, Professor, Hermione interrupted before the two elders could resign themselves. Let me put it another way. She shifted in her chair, and for a moment, the tone of the room changed. She spoke like a board member and not merely a pupil. Minerva, I think your worry is not only about readiness. You're afraid the next generations can't shoulder what you've rebuilt. You worry whether wizards born after the war can pick up that heavy mantle. If everything changes suddenly, can they carry on Hogwarts' legacy? McGonagall seemed taken aback. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it and sighed. Deep down, she could not let go. She had borne responsibilities for so long that fear of letting the young fail made her hesitant and overbearing. You've just said what I wanted to say, she admitted at last. Dumbledore watched Hermione with interest as she continued. You and the other old professors rebuilt everything from ruins. The old Hogwarts survived by a thread. Short on resources, the strongest wounded or worse, betrayals, acceptance letters dried up. You and your generation trained so many wizards and let them shine in what remains of the world. Wizards who've lived through that change may not be more magically talented than others, but their survival instincts and crisis skills are sharper. You're unsure if the post-war generations, the first, second, third cohorts after the war, can bear that same burden. When brutal threats come again, will they persevere like you did until the dawn? She listed names, not just the very first batch, but the second and third, Professor Lily, Professor Lockhart, Percy, and so on, and later me, Harry, Ron, and Ginny. Can we let this ancient school, this wizarding civilization continue. If another war fell, nuclear fire and goblin curses raining down, 1,000 miles of scorched earth with no clean water, even Puffskynes mutated dangerous, could the new generations survive? Hermione met Dumbledore's gaze. I think the difference between you two is not that you can't convince her, but that deep down you share her concerns. Dumbledore smiled, then looked at McGonagall. Minerva, this child sees right through us. McGonagall shook her head, a rueful smile on her face. I'm not sure I even knew the full depth of my worry. In that case, Hermione said, smiling, I have a suggestion. Dumbledore gestured for her to continue. Professor Lockhart's incident is an opportunity, she said, a hint of mischief at the corner of her mouth. A test, both for the professor and for us. The Caro siblings are likely to lie low for a while. That gives me time to give Harry and the others special training. She fixed McGonagall with a steady look. Fledglings have to learn to fly. If we're brave enough, why not start the return now? The trip itself is long anyway. This return needn't be dull, Hermione went on. Voldemort's attempt on me and Lockhart can be a dramatic sideshow. Let Lockhart face the basilisk. Let the second years handle the Caro siblings. I won't take part. If this were easy for me, it wouldn't be a trial. The point is to see how young professors and students face powerful foes, how they confront and perhaps overcome their own fears. We can stand nearby and watch, ensuring things don't spiral out of control. If they succeed, we announce Hogwarts' impending return to the world. McGonagall's eyes widened. It was a plan she had never considered. Dumbledore laughed, delighted. Minerva, perhaps we have underestimated today's children. 144. The Way Forward. Thankfully, nothing worse happened over the Christmas holiday. In the days that followed, the castle returned to its usual hush. The students didn't notice that Hogwarts' direction had changed. It would head north again, slip back into France, cross the English Channel to return to mainland England, and then continue north across the length of England until it reached the Scottish Highlands. The route was long and taxing. They would pass very close to a burning Paris, which risked drawing Grindelwald's attention. He might not act against Hogwarts now, but the possibility was nerve-wracking. The second problem was crossing the sea. Even in winter, when the channel froze, the castle's size and weight meant it couldn't simply walk across. When Hogwarts crossed the channel the first time, the professors and students had to cast a massive levitation charm together, and the castle floated like a ship. It had been a rough passage. Seawater battered the halls, the Slytherin underground dorms were miserable, and the potions classroom turned into an aquarium for a long time. Fortunately, with the Philosopher's Stone as a power source, crossing wouldn't be nearly as perilous now. Dumbledore could use the stone to make the whole castle fly for a time, then land once they reached the other side. Beyond environmental hazards and stray enemies, Hogwarts' return would likely provoke Malfoy Manor. The noble families might tolerate a roaming school that needed their support, but they would not accept a new wizarding power planting itself on the British Isles with the most complete magical heritage intact. If Hogwarts could secure the Scottish Highlands, with the Philosopher's Stone as an energy source, a cadre of top professors, and its long-standing reputation, Dumbledore could, if he wished, turn the castle into the center of a new wizarding community. Wizards and even Muggles, tired of Malfoy domination, would flock to a powerful, secure refuge. With enough land and people, Hogwarts might revive production and become independent of the nobles. Dumbledore and McGonagall probably hadn't planned that far ahead, but the purebloods did not need their permission to worry about it. Even if Hogwarts remained strictly a school, people would still gather near such a powerful sanctuary. Rebuilding Hogsmeade wouldn't be hard if people wanted it. The rise of a new wizarding center would threaten Malfoy Manor's status and even the nobles' foundations. Hogwarts' route was secret, so outsiders would have trouble finding the castle. But the moment McGonagall announced their plans publicly, Malfoy Manor would react. They could threaten to cut off aid, or try to obstruct the castle's path. Interfering with the channel crossing would be ideal. Or they might act more covertly, quietly helping the monsters that harbored at the castle's original site to strengthen them. A Hogwarts dependent on the nobles suited them fine. They would be careful not to act so openly as to force Dumbledore and McGonagall to flee. The world was large, and there were many places the school could go. To Hermione, it all felt distant. In her estimate, they might only barely cross the channel by the end of their second year. To keep stability and secrecy, and to balance teaching, the castle wouldn't move quickly. That evening, she sat in the common room, copying down the Oracle Bubble's magic. She could not forget the promise she had made to Professor Trelawney. Harry suddenly dropped into the seat opposite her. "You're hiding something from me," he said, looking at Hermione with stubborn certainty. "Why would you say that?" she asked. "You've been acting weird since the Christmas feast." He fixed her with a suspicious look. "I can't exactly put my finger on it, but you're different. The way you talk, the way you move, it's not quite you." He scratched his head. "After Professor Lockhart woke up, he kept making weird eye contact with you in the hall. And you looked odd when you saw Draco. And you and Professor McGonagall, you have a secret, don't you? Only you two know about it. Even Mum's in the dark." He rattled off her peculiarities one by one. No one else had noticed any of them. Hermione narrowed her eyes. Harry's intuition was strong. That subconscious sense that something was off often proved decisive in battle. As an experienced combatant, she had a steady spirit and watched her expressions carefully. She had promised to keep Lockhart's secret. She would not speak a word. She would not let her face betray anything. Even when she met Draco, she'd act as if nothing were amiss. Hogwarts' return was only a rough plan. Besides Dumbledore, McGonagall, and herself, the other professors were unaware. She and McGonagall had only exchanged a single look in the corridor, yet Harry had seen it all. "If the professor didn't want to tell you, there must be a reason," she said, leaning back with a smile pressed thin across her lips. "Perhaps we're not strong enough yet." Harry pressed forward, earnest and insistent. "Maybe, but you can see it too. The other professors don't know. You're different from the rest of us." He sprung to his feet, paced twice around the common room, then dropped back into his chair, indignation written across his face. "Compared to us, you hardly seem like a student. Even Professor McGonagall probably looks at you as if you were above most of the staff." That wasn't surprising. Someone who had saved Hogwarts in their first year, pioneered a new branch of magic, negotiated with Busputons by their second year, and set up a perfume workshop at school would naturally be more capable than many adults. Hermione was reliable, powerful, and never caused trouble. Trust came to her easily. He looked up at her, sincere. "Hermione, can you teach me how to get strong? I don't mean the first-year stuff you already taught us. I mean your adaptability in combat, your tactical thinking, your mindset. You go into a fight without fear. Your presence alone made Lockhart wary. That isn't something you learn from a book." Second-year Harry was no longer the boy who only saw the surface. He had grown. His own raw fighting talent hadn't fully manifested yet, but he could already recognize what Hermione brought to a fight. A smile tugged at Hermione's mouth. Was this a pillow someone had brought just when she'd been about to lie down? She had planned to give the three boys special training. Now Harry had come to find her of his own accord. "If you just give us a few pointers and let Ron, Neville, and me practice ourselves," Harry frowned. "We might become fine wizards, but it won't be enough. I don't want fine. I want to be strong enough to change things." There was a steady flame in his eyes, the desire for greatness and deeds that marked him even when she'd first met him. Like someone who wants to rise and be remembered, Hermione thought. It was a little naive, maybe, but it was passionate. "Real training won't be as easy as practical classes," she said. What other kids called harsh practicals were tame, she thought. They never provided a truly dangerous atmosphere. The students knew they might be hurt, but their lives weren't at real risk. Best potions and healers were on hand. "I can do it," Harry said instantly. "And Ron and Neville, I know they can do it too." He dragged his two friends into the plan without a moment's doubt. Hermione crossed her legs, amused. "So, have you finished reading George and Fred's Transfiguration textbooks?" Long ago, she had promised Harry that if he self-studied the third-year Transfiguration curriculum before Christmas, she would consider beginning research into human transfiguration early. Harry's face went awkward. "I thought you'd forgotten," he blurted. "But I'm nearly finished. I will finish before the holidays are over." Hermione straightened, the smile gone. "Then it's settled. When the holidays end and Ron and Neville return, we'll start. Real, brutal training. Training that will make you strong." 145. There is a hidden road ahead. The short Christmas break vanished in a blink. When Ron and Neville popped back into the Gryffindor dormitory through the common room fireplace, they were still basking in the memory of not having to attend classes or do homework. Then they learned that their good friend Harry had signed them up for what he cheerfully called a strongman hell training package. "Why do you have to make me suffer and drag Neville along?" Ron grumbled. But when Harry painted a vivid picture of Hermione secretly flirting with professors and keeping dangerous things from them, allegations exaggerated to provoke them, the two boys' competitive spirits flared. In truth, Hermione hadn't deliberately hidden things from them. She'd simply kept certain matters confidential for the time being. Still, she knew how to use that ambiguity to whip the three of them into a frenzy. Hermione even persuaded Dumbledore to lend her the meditation basin. She played a pitiful, wide-eyed appeal and invoked the influence of the school board, and Dumbledore softened, agreed. McGonagall, meanwhile, insisted on continuing to use the headmaster's office for official business while she stayed in the Transfiguration office. Hermione's plan wasn't to carry out the training in the real world. It would be impossible to reach the level she wanted that way. She had taken inspiration from Lockhart's spiritual experiments. Although she couldn't yet pull people directly into her own consciousness, the meditation basin could do the trick. Coupled with the memory charm techniques in Lockhart's notes, she could construct an idealized combat environment inside the basin, false memories and fabricated foes that trainees could fight and interact with. That way, the three boys could undergo brutal conditioning in the mind without being physically harmed. Of course, injuries felt in the spirit world still hurt, and Hermione could amplify that pain. Death in the basin would recreate the terrible terror of sinking into an abyss. She modeled it on the sensation of being backstabbed and killed, and it would feel frighteningly real. That guarantee of authenticity would ensure people had second thoughts about repeating the ordeal. Lockhart woke up over the holidays, so defense against the dark arts wasn't disrupted after term resumed. Because Hogwarts had shifted its course, McGonagall apologized to him that they needed to rethink locations for outdoor practical lessons. With Death Eaters prowling outside and a basilisk rumored nearby, keeping pupils outside might look irresponsible. But Hermione and Dumbledore persuaded her otherwise. Since they were testing and probing, they could not cling to old timidity. If they withdrew from the open because the enemy might be lying low, they would be giving up initiative, and Electo Caro, unlike her dull-witted brother, would notice an abrupt change in routine as proof their manipulation of Draco had been discovered. Cautious behavior might only encourage her to devise darker schemes. In the end, McGonagall didn't cancel outdoor classes. She would only increase patrols, and Dumbledore would lend some of his own vigilance to watch the practice areas. Lockhart remained unaware that Hermione had already told the two headmasters about his past and about Draco. He fancied himself a hero who had saved a child's soul and was smugly content, finding only it slightly odd that the castle's course had shifted. After all, Hogwarts had spent nearly 50 years wandering mostly through Europe. A small change of direction didn't seem important to him. Over in the perfume workshop, the 7 apprentices had spent the holidays working non-stop, refusing to go home. They produced a large stockpile, and after term, the goods were dispatched to Beauxbatons by Fleur. It was their first sale to Beauxbatons, small in quantity but a promising start. About 1,000 galleons were deposited and split proportionally between Hermione and the school, making her arguably the richest student at Hogwarts. Once the inciting spray was fully integrated into Beauxbatons' production, the managers, who would immediately notice the boost to throughput, would not be satisfied with small-scale use. Between the perfume house and the alchemist professor's research, demand for that powerful catalyst would grow, and large orders would surely follow. On McGonagall's suggestion, Professor Sprout recruited a group of graduating herbology students to expand the underground greenhouse and begin growing the crops needed for the spray. Everyone worked hard to keep the formula's existence a secret within the school. Because Harry had actually kept his promise and finished the third-year Transfiguration textbook before the end of the break, Hermione's special training began without delay. After classes one day, she led the three of them to the room of requirement, made them complete their professor's homework under her supervision, and revealed the meditation basin standing in the center of the room. She'd arranged for the room to move it there once she had permission. "So we're going to fight creatures you imagined inside the basin?" Harry asked, a little skeptical. Even with Hermione's talents, he wondered how comprehensive her imagination could be. Even if she conjured terrifying foes, would they obey physical laws in a way that actually built skill? Hermione smiled but said nothing. The memories she had obtained from the Tarnished who became the Elden Lord were horrifyingly real. Standing before those demigods who wielded great runes, even Dumbledore and Grindelwald might find breath hard to come by. Yet she wasn't about to plunge 3 second years straight into that inferno. In the Elden Lord story, even he had to slay Albinaurics and gather runes one by one to grow stronger. Hermione planned a graded approach. The first set of challenges would be familiar Limgrave creatures with their power carefully throttled to suit the boys' level. Demi-humans in caves, imps and gravekeepers in catacombs, wandering trolls and land octopuses, and the classic starter terror, the Great Tree Guardian. These scenarios emphasize straightforward combat rather than guile. Hermione would suppress the enemy's strength so their fights would be demanding but not hopeless. She smiled and guided the three boys to lean over the basin until their foreheads were immersed, then picked up the Transfiguration notes from the former Marauders and began to study. She still had to keep her promise to Harry and start researching animagus transformation. Fortunately, because her memory charm wasn't yet fully refined, time flowed at the same rate inside and outside the basin. She wouldn't have to study for 5 minutes and then haul the boys out every time they were defeated. A cool breeze brushed their faces as Harry pushed open the heavy door. He, Ron, and Hermione stepped through and stood, confused, at what met their eyes. A gentle slope, every inch of soil covered in green. "Welcome to Limgrave, your first trial ground," said Hermione, now wearing the Finger Maiden's robes and somehow taller, her slender frame taking on the calm, adult poise of the guide who had stood where White Mask Vare once stood. She smiled at them, offering the opening instructions to the newcomers. "Hermione, how did you end up like this?" Ron blurted, shocked. "This is only an avatar I constructed from memory, not the real me," the adult Hermione said. "My existence here is simply to teach and guide you through the trials." "Limgrave, does that mean the grave of limbs?" Harry frowned. "Why would such a beautiful place have such a terrifying name?" Hermione didn't answer the idle questions. She pointed toward the open woods and rolling hills. Beneath this peaceful appearance, countless dangers lurk: crazed soldiers, terrifying trolls, sea beasts dragged ashore, and darkness in the tombs. You must cooperate to clear those threats, but be warned, aside from your own wands and magic, you will receive no outside help. No potions, no alchemical aids, no powerful reinforcements, only what you carry and the companions at your backs. Here, your wounds won't worsen, but the pain remains. When you die, you will be ejected back into the real world. If you re-enter, everything starts over. Golden sights of grace that save your progress are rare, so be extremely careful. Hermione's figure began to fade, an illusion shattering. "Even though my guidance will end, I wish you to become the king of—" Her voice broke off. Harry and Ron didn't catch the last word, but it didn't matter. The boys were thrilled enough to be on a grand adventure. As a Finger Maiden, Hermione would normally have accompanied them and used stored runes to strengthen them after kills, but her memory magic wasn't stable enough to sustain that role here. So there would be no extra flasks of Crimson Tears, no spirit ashes, no donated weapons or gear. They had to depend on their own magic. Fortunately, this world was only a faint echo in Hermione's memory. She could tune the enemy's strength. And Harry, Ron, and Hermione had more magic than the Tarnished did at the start, an unlimited trial and error. They could try again without cost. They scanned the landscape for a direction. The world before them was vast and offered no obvious clues. The golden sights of grace Hermione mentioned were nowhere to be seen. "There's a ruined church up on that rise," Harry said. He had the best eyesight and could make out broken walls sticking up behind the trees. "Let's head there and see what we find." "It doesn't look too dangerous," Ron said, eager. They started toward the ruins as Hermione's mind wandered back to one of her older obsessions, animagus research, and how the Marauders had changed its practice. Animagus had always been one of the riskiest branches of human transfiguration. Hermione, raised on colder, more methodical magic, had only recently felt confident enough, after poring over Percy's textbooks, to study it properly. The Marauders' notes were unusually detailed about the steps of becoming an animagus, but James, Sirius, and the others had worked on that after the war, when dust clouds often obscured the sky. A necessary step in animagus work was exposing a potion to moonlight. In the Marauders' time, the skies were sometimes filled with dust so thick the moon could be completely hidden. Conventional methods, waiting for clear skies and natural lightning, were often impossible. So the Marauders made bold, dangerous modifications. Lupin argued that the moon had an intrinsic role in transfiguration. Werewolf transformations and vampire bloodlust intensified on full moons. Some force of the moon seemed to catalyze the change. The Marauders believed the moon's role could be substituted with a stable source of real moonlight. James experimented tirelessly. He borrowed ideas from Muggle scientists. He built a hot air balloon sturdy enough to lift a sliver of Sirius's two-way mirror above the dust clouds, while the other half stayed on the ceiling of the room of requirement. That patch of genuine moonlight, untroubled by weather, made all the difference. They also replaced storm-lit lightning, when necessary, by burning Thunderbird tail feathers. The four Gryffindors' methods were reckless. McGonagall, when she learned of their improvisations years later, was speechless and swore it was Merlin's blessing they survived. A few years before them, a student attempting animagus had suffered a terrible, irreversible transformation. The danger was real. Sirius had once proposed using Lupin's werewolf hair as a substitute for moonlight. Lupin vetoed the idea to avoid risking his friends. Despite their recklessness, the Marauders' innovations made future instruction much safer, but only by a hair. Hermione likened animagus to another kind of transformation ritual, dragon communion from the Forbidden Lands. Though superficially similar, both let humans borrow bestial power, they were different in origin and consequence. Dragon communion was an almost blasphemous rite. A devotee bathes in dragon blood, consumes dragon hearts, and in return can alter parts of themselves into draconic form, breathing fire or lightning. This power came at a cost. Repeated crude communion and heart-devouring could degrade the practitioner into a sorrowful earth dragon, a beast reduced to groveling on the ground, consuming soil and lava. An alternate hypothesis held that dragon communion was a selection ritual used by ancient dragons. Only those with true reverence and steady faith would ascend into noble ancient dragons, mastering lightning and horrific breath. Hermione didn't know which was right. The truth lay in the legendary Land of Shadow, sealed by Queen Marika, a place she had never seen. The Tarnished who had become king had dabbled in dragon communion, greedily taking various draconic powers but never committing fully. In this world, great dragons existed but were weak, more like powerful beasts than the legendary creatures of old. Skilled wizards could subdue them. Charlie Weasley, Ron's brother, raised dragons near Mount Vesuvius as work animals for wizards. They were livestock for materials. Still, many young wizards adored dragons. Draco Malfoy plastered his homework with dragon stickers. Hermione mused that if dragon communion could be altered, if a devoted practitioner could consume a world dragon's heart on an altar, might they gain draconic transformation without going through animagus? The idea was tantalizing, but far too speculative. She couldn't experiment on herself. For now, it made more sense to follow the Marauders' proven path, replicate their methods step by step. 147. A little bet for Hermione. The hard part wasn't learning the steps so much as making sure she wouldn't fumble when it really mattered. She read the notes carefully, over and over, and tried to absorb the precise, restrained determination Professor McGonagall had talked about for transfiguration. Then she summoned the house elf Dobby and had him fetch a large meat rat for practice. When Harry and the others stumbled out of the meditation basin, dizzy and sore, they found Hermione turning the plump rat into Ron one moment, into Harry the next, and into Neville after that. Her control still had rough edges. When the rat swelled to human size, it looked a little flabby, and the transformed Harry still had a faint down of fur on his face. Thankfully, no whiskers. "Hey, Hermione, what are you doing? Are you playing with us while we're suffering?" Harry rubbed his aching backside where the Great Tree Guardian's horse had kicked him. "Merlin's pants. I told you we should have gone around. A medieval magic knight in full heavy armor who can reflect spells? We couldn't even beat that horse." Ron, still shaken, cracked his neck as he spoke. He'd fallen off a cliff while trying to get away and come off worse for it. "We only fought a few wolves and goats, and then, bam, this knight appears from the forest path, and he bounces our spells back with this giant shield. The bloke's cheating. Even a true Gryffindor can't wear heavy armor, carry a golden halberd, and chase us all over a mountain," Harry added, more sour than heroic. Hermione raised an eyebrow. "What, are you already thinking of giving up?" Harry snorted. "How could that be? I'm just complaining about the designer's dark sense of humor." He looked at Ron and Neville. "We need a plan, and I don't think we should tackle the Great Tree Guardian as soon as we go in." "Right. Save the king for last," Ron agreed, rubbing his neck. "Compared to Hermione, our combat skills are terrible. We should be able to deal with things like wolf packs and those crazed soldiers properly first, and that creepy tomb and those ugly giants wandering the hillside." "Hermione, you've got ideas," Ron blurted. "Stitching trolls and giants together. What would you even call those? Mountain trolls. They're horrible." Neville, though still blinking from pain, was in surprisingly good spirits, his eyes bright as if eager for another round. He looked at Hermione hesitantly. "Maybe you could put some magical plants in? I tried those little red wild berries by the roadside. They're sour and astringent, but edible. If we could brew potions or gather more magical plants inside, our tactics could be more varied." Hermione couldn't bring herself to tell him that those berries were normally used to feed the horses. She shrugged. "I'd like to, but the inner work is deep. Professor Lockhart's notes helped me a lot, but I have a long way to go." She nodded toward the rat. "I promised Harry I'd work on animagus first." Harry grinned and clapped Neville on the shoulder. "So we can all learn human transfiguration sooner. We're making do for now." "Exactly," Ron agreed. Hermione admitted, "I've memorized the basic procedure, but I'm not yet expert at the delicate parts of transfiguration." "Herbology this year has mandrakes," she went on. "I can get some leaves from the greenhouse later. The key Professor Sprout gave me will be handy. There's also Death's Head Hawkmoth and Thunderbird feathers. The Hawkmoth should be in Professor Lily's materials cabinet, and for the Thunderbird feathers, we'd probably have to borrow Fleur's connections. The Beauxbatons team that caught one might not mind selling a tail feather." Harry's eyes brightened with a sudden idea. "How about a contest, Hermione? Let's see who finishes first, you completing human transfiguration or us defeating the Great Tree Guardian." Hermione tossed the rat, back in its original form, onto his head. "You're cheeky. The first step of animagus requires holding a mandrake leaf in your mouth for a month. The Great Tree Guardian hardly casts. It's just the reflecting shield. If you take a month to beat him, you might as well go back to first year and keep practicing roles." Harry teased, taking the rat off his head. The creature was surprisingly tame and docile. Despite being transfigured repeatedly by Hermione, it remained calm as a capybara. "Then a month it is. Let's see whether you complete the first animagus step first, or we bring down the Great Tree Guardian," Harry declared. Hermione thought for a moment. The bet favored the boys. One powerful mounted charge by the Guardian could be dangerous if Hermione faced it alone, but with 3 coordinated casters controlling distance and timing, the Guardian wasn't unbeatable. Still, it wasn't really about winning. If a little wager could push all of them to improve faster, it would be worth it even if she lost. She smiled. "All right, I accept. If I lose, I'll give each of you a present." "Really?" The 3 boys brightened immediately. "Deal." "If we lose," Harry hesitated, trying to find a stake, "you get to pick the nicknames for the new Marauders from now on." Neville, quick on the uptake, grinned. Hermione glanced at the clock on the wall. The bet starts now. Tonight's on me. It's only a little past 10. You can manage a few more challenges. Ha! Arrogant Lion Queen, you'll pay for this, Ron shouted, already diving back into the meditation basin. The others weren't about to be outdone. They followed him in. Hermione shook her head, laughing, and went back to practicing transfiguration on the large rat. 148. Each one works hard normally. The first step toward becoming an animagus is simple, but tedious. Hold a single mandrake leaf in your mouth from one full moon to the next. James and Sirius followed that rule to the letter, but when only Peter was left, they decided the astronomical timing and waiting were too ridiculous. So they soaked the mandrake leaf in an extract of mooncalf silver dung and had Peter hold it for a month. Surprisingly, that still satisfied the requirements for human transfiguration. Hermione, seeing an opportunity to put pressure on the others, went to the greenhouse the next day, picked a mandrake leaf, and asked Professor Sprout for a tiny amount of mooncalf dung, powerful fertilizer, but produced in very small quantities. The idea of holding a dung-covered leaf in her mouth for a month while eating, drinking, talking, and sleeping sounded unpleasant, but she didn't balk. After all, she'd become used to chasing dung beetles in the Forbidden Land and uncovering useful things from their dung balls. She deliberately made an effort to raise the stakes for Harry and the others. She told Professor McGonagall that she planned to begin the animagus trial. McGonagall hesitated. This was normally attempted only by 6th or 7th years, but remembered Hermione's determination and insisted she must be present for the crucial step. Hermione agreed readily, smiling. This is a test for me too. It was unusual. Students as young as Hermione attempting human transfiguration. For the rest of January, the second-year Gryffindors lived in a tense competitive atmosphere. Days were for lessons and Quidditch practice. Nights were for sneaking to the room of requirement after curfew and undertaking grueling runs through the Forbidden Land once homework was done. Hermione had it a little easier during the day, but she also had a second paper to write, which drained mental energy, even if it didn't exhaust her physically. Harry, determined to unsettle her, occasionally slipped very sour food into Hermione's meals in the hope she'd spit the leaf out. Hermione retaliated quietly, increasing the pain feedback in the meditation basin, making injuries feel worse than they were, like scattering the blood flame of the formless mother across a wound. These were small tricks and remained playful. Mostly everyone had their own obstacles to overcome. Each night, the three boys came back with new complaints. What kind of creature rolls into a ball and suddenly attacks? One grumbled. Hermione, you did that on purpose, didn't you? How can a fire dragon just swoop down while we're walking? There are night cavalry at night. They're scarier than the Great Tree Guardian. Traps in the catacombs are one thing. What kind of sick hobby hides so many imps in blind spots? And those pretty flowers? They explode. Hermione stayed quiet, smiling, and kept practicing control over transfiguration. She didn't tell them the worst trials were still to come. She was merciful enough not to let them face the rolling wheels or the putrid tree spirit the moment they spawned. January at Hogwarts moved on at a cautious pace. The school was already nearing a return to southern France. Lockhart led another practical lesson, clearing redcaps from a decades-old war ruin. These little blood-borne monsters were vicious, but with steady nerves and the right spell, they were manageable. Because the main cursed object responsible for the unrest hadn't been neutralized yet, Lockhart experienced grogginess and hallucinations after each outdoor class, though returning to the castle or taking potions usually ended the effects. Lockhart noticed the trio handled redcaps with practiced ease. He didn't know they'd been driven near mad by imps around every corner. Compared to the creatures in the Forbidden Land, redcaps were mild. Even Ron now flinched at phantom kidney pains whenever imps crossed his mind. Beyond the Gryffindors, Draco received extra attention. Hermione instructed him and Lockhart to act perfectly normal. Although Lockhart could show a little caution, someone affected by a curse shouldn't have no reaction at all. Draco's job was to act as if he hadn't been discovered, working hard to hide his unease. Hermione suspected the Carrows had ways to monitor teachers and students outdoors, but she doubted they'd dare get close or perform remote legilimency. Watching from afar was likely as bold as they could be. Other professors took to ostentatious broom patrols, as if searching for something. Dumbledore's phoenix even made a few laps. McGonagall explained the caution to the others as a fear of a potential basilisk in southern France, an explanation meant to keep the real watch secret. The Carrows weren't frightened by the professor's clumsy patrols. As long as Draco remained undiscovered, they were confident they could stay hidden. Their caution would likely continue until the weather warmed, depending on how long Electo Carrow could maintain vigilance. If they chose to act, they would use Draco to bait Lockhart and Hermione out. Sky Eye helped on their side. Before outdoor lessons, she used oracle bubbles to stabilize and extend her sight, remotely viewing the Carrows to make sure everything remained under control. The doll given to Draco served as a medium. After the fingerbone was removed and the dark magic dispelled, it was a filthy object, still strongly linked to Electo. Hermione even offered to let Lockhart try to use the fingerbone to summon his sister's souls back, perhaps to keep them at his side. After one attempt, they discovered his sister's souls seemed gone, perhaps consumed by Voldemort. Draco suffered the most. Hermione had told him to act terrified, and he did, because he was terrified, not pretending. She made him make excuses to be alone outside and shout Dobby into the air, trying to draw out the Carrows. They never showed, but the ordeal strained Draco's nerve. Hermione also had Lockhart teach him a brain closure technique so his thoughts wouldn't be easily read if he met Electo again. If you get exposed too early, Hermione told him flatly, neither I nor Professor Lockhart will be able to save you. Whether from the pressure or natural talent, Draco learned quickly. He could now mask his thoughts and even handle a Kneasel calmly, like Hermione. To Lockhart, it looked like Hermione was planning a daring counter-operation, teaming up with him to trap 2 Death Eaters and a basilisk. It fit his romantic, heroic self-image perfectly. He didn't realize that others were watching quietly from behind the scenes. Lockhart, like Draco, was simply part of the bait. 149. Small gift. Perhaps the brilliance of the outdoor practical class finally convinced Harry and the others that their suffering these past weeks had not been in vain. They grew more determined to conquer Limgrave. One evening at the end of January, a cheer interrupted Hermione's spellcasting. The 3 boys clambered out of the meditation basin and hugged each other in messy celebration. "We did it! We did it! The cursed Great Tree Guardian has been Wingardium Leviosa," Harry shouted. It wasn't easy. Except for Harry's chain, our attacks felt like tickling a heavily armored knight, Neville sighed. "Don't say that. If I hadn't blocked that killing blow for him at the last second, we'd have had to start over a dozen times," Ron protested. "Yeah, you did block the halberd swing, but you nearly got crushed into the ground and couldn't move," Harry laughed. "Luckily, Neville was quick and pulled you out. Otherwise, you might have been split in 2 again." Yes, Neville's levitation was beautiful. It shifted the Great Tree Guardian's center of gravity. "I didn't expect that move to work against a mounted knight," Ron praised, and Neville scratched his head sheepishly. "Not to dampen your excitement, but the Great Tree Guardian here is basically an early-game mob," Hermione said calmly. "The ones guarding Lanedale are much stronger than this wandering guardian in Limgrave, and that's not even mentioning the Dragonic Tree Sentinel in crumbling Farum Azula. Then there are Crucible Knights, Carrion Knights, Bloodhound Knights, Cleanrot Knights, Headless Lost Grace Knights, each with their own strengths. They all tormented the Tarnished back then." "I think we've got the hang of it," Harry said confidently. "Even if enemies later are tougher, they won't hold us up a whole month like that one did." Hermione smiled without answering. She let them enjoy their triumph, and if fate allowed, learn the truth of hardship later. "Hermione, time to pay up on your bet. We won!" Ron shouted. This might be his only real chance to beat Hermione at something. All right. What's the gift? You haven't been secretly preparing something, have you?" Harry asked eagerly. Hermione gave the large rat a casual stun, led them back to the meditation basin, and said, "Come on. This gift has to be delivered in the spirit world." Like ink dropped into water, dark and light swirled, then streaks of color filled the scene until the world became vivid and lifelike. The 3 of them were back in the Forbidden Land, standing between a gentle slope and a lawn. The Great Tree Guardian's body still lay where they'd left it, An adult version of Finger Maiden Hermione stood behind them. A battle that wasn't great, but inspiring nonetheless, the Finger Maiden observed. Setting out on an adventure is dangerous, brave ones. You need new magic to boost your combat power. So the gift is magic, Ron said excitedly. This is exactly right for a hero's journey. Hermione, you don't read night novels, do you? Harry laughed. Hermione smiled. Based on how you've performed these past few days, I'm going to teach each of you one spell or skill I think suits you best. These are combat magics I believe will help. She looked at Harry first. Harry, as the team's attacker, you carry the responsibility for dealing the most damage. Your progressively stronger enchanted weapons combined with that chain are already enough to break most enemy defenses. Even heavily armored knights or tank-like foes would have trouble with you for long. But your biggest problem is that you often miss your target. Harry nodded. In the fight with the Great Tree Guardian, apart from the first strike, which had surprised the opponent because he didn't expect that level of force, it was hard to get close to the mounted knight afterward. Hermione had set their intelligence fairly high. Once the Guardian realized Harry was the only one who could harm it, it kept avoiding him, using the warhorse's speed to circle Ron and Neville and tire Harry out. Perhaps when you get stronger and learn flying spells, this will change, but you'll also need more powerful offensive spells by then, she continued. So I'll teach you a night sorcery called Invisibility Blade to make up for your current weakness. Invisibility Blade, a night sorcery from Celia, Town of Sorcery, can completely hide the appearance of a weapon in the user's hand. Historically, it was used by assassins to appear unarmed. In the Forbidden Land, this spell is normally useless because Invisibility Blade cancels most other weapon enchanting magics, so assassins could only use plain weapons against mages without heavy armor. But in this world, or perhaps due to a subtle difference in magical properties, Invisibility Blade does not dispel other buffs on a weapon. Hermione had immediately thought of Harry's new tactic: enchant the steel chain flail, then cloak the weapon with Invisibility Blade. Harry, with an innocent face, could approach as if surrendering, then strike with a hidden, fully enchanted weapon. Or, with his invisibility cloak and an invisible enchanted weapon, he could creep through a crowd undetected. The vision was brutal and delightfully effective. Hermione took out her silver-white staff and, with a wave, made the metal shaft vanish. The three watched her empty hand, then each got a gentle tap on the head. "This is perfect. It's so me," Harry grinned. Since arriving in the Forbidden Land, he had shifted from a reckless, straightforward fighter towards someone who favored more insidious tactics. Hermione didn't start teaching immediately. She turned to Ron. Your magical shield, combined with the extremely defensive shield wand, has nearly reached the ceiling of current defensive power. I'm not sure even the professor's shield charms are as resilient as yours. But your problem is obvious. Your attack is too weak. You can only support with spells like Petrificus Totalis and Binding Charms. You're a very good shield for the team, but you need some way to threaten the enemy too. If you simply act like a turtle shell, an enemy who ignores you and picks off your teammates will leave you helpless. Ron protested. I have a short sword, and with a weapon enchantment. Then you're an excellent medieval shield bearer, Hermione cut in. Watch closely. With a wave of her hand, the Great Tree Guardian on the ground rose as if time had rewound, springing back to life. The enraged knight saw the three who had slain him and turned his horse to charge again. Stay put, Hermione instructed. The three boys, a little uneasy but remembering this was her spirit world, stayed frozen. A fluorescent blue light ran along Hermione's staff, magical weapon enchantment, and the Guardian charged, hefting its golden halberd. At the moment the halberd came down, Hermione met it with both hands and shoved. The massive armored knight was bounced backward, his attack interrupted. He lost his balance and nearly fell from his horse. Seizing the advantage, Hermione unleashed a flurry of radiant Carrion Swiftblade strikes, cutting into the Guardian's golden armor. Because it was only a demonstration, she did not go further. While the Guardian tried to right itself, Hermione waved and paused time, freezing the knight and his horse in place. 150. The carrot hanging in front of your eyes, Hermione turned to Ron. Shield parry. It's an art of timing and leverage. It's not really a spell, she continued, more of a combat skill, but anyone who masters it becomes an incredibly difficult opponent in a duel. How do you do it? Ron gaped. The knight's blow had looked overwhelming. Even at full force, he felt he could only block it. Hermione, however, had merely used her staff, enchanted as a magic weapon, to meet the strike. The staff vibrated, not only deflecting the knight's attack, but upsetting his balance as well. Choose the optimal parry timing, disrupt the enemy's offense, and unbalance them, she explained. In theory, you can parry with any weapon, but a shield, a small round shield like yours, is best for beginners. It's the quickest way to learn. Hermione, as a finger maiden, had little need for shield parries. She usually relied on sacred seals. But the Tarnished had practiced the move extensively and had many friendly exchanges with the Crucible Knights, the shield parry instructors. Against something like the Great Tree Guardian, you can disrupt his balance the moment the attack lands, and then take your chance to strike. You bought a short sword at Beauxbatons, didn't you? Use that opening to finish him. She restored the Great Tree Guardian from time stop. After another precise shield parry, she knocked him from his horse. Hermione slid behind the fallen knight, and with a merciful but decisive grip, held his head and drove a Carrion Swiftblade, fast and clean, through his chest. The knight fell back into death. And once your shield parry is refined enough, Hermione went on, you can even combine it with the shield charm or reflection charm to bounce enemy spells back. You can send them to angles where they're hard to counter, or even amplify an attack and reflect it with greater force, like the Great Tree Guardian's shield reflection. Ron's eyes lit up. He'd envied the Great Tree Guardian's golden retaliation, but after the fight, he'd found he couldn't heft his shield properly. Shield parry looked hard to learn, but it was undeniably cool. He pictured himself pulling off moves as elegant as Hermione's. She turned to Neville. Finally, Neville, I think you have a natural talent for swords, but a scabbard wand enchanted as a magic weapon is awkward, neither sharp enough nor heavy enough, and the reach is limited. So I'll teach you Carrion Swiftblade. You can do far more than just swing it around randomly. Neville thanked her over and over, surprised and relieved. He'd suspected his attacks lacked power, but had blamed his enchantment practice. He would never have asked Hermione for sword lessons on his own. Swiftblade is only the beginning of a whole sword magic series, Hermione added. If you pick it up quickly, I'll consider teaching you more advanced spells. She demonstrated. Standing still, she took a step back, leaned forward, and thrust her staff. A fluorescent blue sword, nearly 10 meters long, shot out, heating the air as it extended. Carrion Piercer can punch through most defensive magic. Even Beauxbaton's strongest adamant shield won't survive 2 hits of this. I tested it on Lucius. She raised her staff again, and a massive greatsword of light formed. As she swung, a large area was bathed in blue. Carrion Greatsword hits slower than Swiftblade, but with far greater impact and range, it can cleave through tougher foes. Hermione smiled. And if that still isn't enough? She braced, gripping her staff with both hands. The air roared, pressure building until none of them could keep their eyes fully open. With a thunderous boom, she carved a scorched cleft across the hillsides. The scale was astonishing. Ron muttered that even a basilisk would be split before it could react. Hermione withdrew the display. They were in the spirit world, so the demonstrations had cost them no real magic. This move suits enemies that don't move easily, she warned. If you tried to cut a basilisk with it, a great bow with sufficient range might be more effective. You must judge distance perfectly. Too early, and you hit nothing. Too slow, and you get destroyed first. Harry felt a twinge of grievance. Neville gets an entire sword series, and my invisibility blade is only ever useful as a transition. Hermione had anticipated that. I've thought about your follow-up spells, she said to Harry. Holding her staff with one hand, she raised it high. A philosopher's stone-like shell of light formed into a giant hammer. She smashed it into the ground. The impact detonated outward across 10 meters, a violent explosion that would have flattened anything in its radius. Magic weapon, invisibility blade, and Haima glintstone hammer, used in sequence, can obliterate most things in your path. The sheer destructive power thrilled Harry. He started imagining himself smashing armored troops with one swing. What about me? I want more. Ron protested. Shield parry should see you through for life, Hermione said. It's different from those other magic types. It doesn't have levels, but it's extremely advanced. Ron looked disappointed. Hermione softened. However, if you master shield parry to my satisfaction, I can teach you another spell, one I think only you, among the three of you, might truly wield. She cast a faint red veil that drifted through them. Hermione stood before Ron. Raise your shield and use your strongest defense. Without understanding why, Ron enchanted his small round shield with a shield charm and braced it with his left hand. I will only strike once, Hermione said, eyes misty. World of the all-knowing, shining stone pebbles. A pebble, trailing a bright tail, struck the shield with a pop. That tiny impact shattered the shield charm and slammed into the shield with enough force to knock Ron backward onto the ground. How is that possible? He cried, sprawled and stunned. World of the all-knowing is a way of seeing everything's weaknesses, Hermione explained. When you can perceive all things and know their faults, even a single finger can pry open the earth. The technique came from the all-knowing scepter the Tarnished had seized. Its wielder, Sir Gideon Ovnir, the all-knowing, was a strategist whose insight was famous. He had once helped the Tarnished make progress, but at the end he blocked the Tarnished's path. He saw through the Queen's plan, and thinking it irreversible, chose the wrong course. The world of the all-knowing had caused the Tarnished great trouble. When invoked, even the most unremarkable pebble could become a lethal blade. The magic imposed strict requirements. Only those with exceptional intellect could wield it freely. The Tarnished, a so-called idiot with intelligence 9, could only force it through with the scepter. Hermione admitted she wasn't sure about Ron. He often seemed slow. He made simple grammar mistakes and was clumsy, but at Wizard's chess, he was unbeatable. His intelligence showed itself in odd, strategic ways. If anyone had the right sort of mind to use World of the All-Knowing, it might be Ron. If he could learn it, the one who was the strongest with a shield could become the sharpest sword. That's amazing, Ron, Harry laughed, slapping his shoulder. If Hermione thinks you can learn it, that's something. Ron stared. Longing and disbelief mixed on his face. He'd been dismissed as dim for so long. Hermione shrugged lightly. Start with shield parry. All three of you need to learn the basics first. Don't aim too high yet. When will you teach us the next level? Harry asked eagerly. Hermione's smile deepened, making them all a little nervous. After you defeat the Great Tree Guardian wandering in Limgrave, the road to Stormvale Castle, the Vale of Storms, will open. Brave adventurers, there is an evil scion of royalty there, a pathetic noble performing cruel grafting rituals for power. Go and defeat him. A new location unlocked on their map. Hermione believed Stormvale Castle would leave them each with even more unforgettable memories. February arrived, and Hermione could finally spit the tasteless leaf out of her mouth. She rode Lockhart's flying carpet, his ill-advised Christmas gift, high into the sky with the small crystal vial tucked safely against her. Breaking through the thick radioactive dust, she rose above the cloud sea, and with no impurities in the way, could see the world's stars. It felt a little like looking up from Liurnia of the Lakes. She found herself staring at the bright moon for a long time, lost in thought. For students of Shining Stone magic, seeing the moon like this should have been a wonder. Unfortunately, the moon here was not like the one in the Forbidden Land. It was just an ordinary moon. Her mind wandered to Ranni, the Moon Princess, to the Tarnished, who still remembered her on another throne, and to her family in another world. She could not linger at that height for long. Her bubblehead charm was starting to press uncomfortably tight, and although the radiation in the dust cloud couldn't harm her, the acrid tang of goblin curses made her queasy. That deep, unmistakable malice, the dark red she could not feel on the ground, settled on her tongue. She had left the two-way mirror behind. Harry and the others were still far from true human transfiguration. They would need the moonlight for their training, and Hermione had decided to complete the potion's final preparations under the real moon by herself. She carefully placed the single mandrake leaf into the crystal vial, added a strand of her own hair, set in the death's head hawkmoth she had asked Lily for, and stirred in a silver teaspoon of dew taken from a place untouched by sun or human hands for exactly 7 days. She had miscalculated. The list of ingredients was too telltale. When she requisitioned the hawk moth and the other oddities, Lily immediately twigged. "You found James's old transfiguration notes, didn't you?" The potions master asked, and Hermione felt a cold disappointment. She had planned everything, and yet she'd overlooked Harry's mother. Lily followed the clues with swift, precise steps. "So you found the room of requirement?" she pressed. Before Hermione could reply, Lily narrowed her eyes and said, with a dangerous certainty, "So James gave the Marauder's map to Harry, didn't he?" Hermione said nothing. Lily had worked it out on her own. "I hope Mr. Potter's final grades can save his father," Lily added, almost in warning. Then she softened. "Since McGonagall knows, I won't stop you, but be careful. When you do the final step, notify me." When the time came, Hermione would have not one but two professors watching her transform. After finishing preparations at altitude, she hid the little crystal vial and its strange contents in the room of requirement. She imagined a quiet, dark chamber that only she could open. Then, at sunrise and sunset, she had to point her wand to her heart and chant, "Amado, animado, animagus." She had to keep at it until she could feel a second heartbeat. Only then could she give a Thunderbird tail feather to a trusted friend and have them pick a moment to burn it before her. The sudden spark was supposed to call up a clap of thunder and a small rain cloud. Standing under that rain, she had to pull out the completed potion and drink it. James had altered that last part. No more waiting for a random storm. A friend lighting the feather produced the right effect every time. It had been proven. While Hermione worked on her own progress, the three boys had been spending almost all their free time in the meditation basin. She had left 3 memory avatars, each composed of a different set of memories, and they trained with each in turn. At Harry's instigation, they had even tried to break into Stormvale Castle, a foolhardy raid that ended badly. After stumbling past the trolls on Stormhill and crashing through the checkpoint, they were wrecked by the Omen Killer in the city tunnel. They had learned their lesson. They would study more magic and plan better before attempting such a thing again. There was a silver lining. Hermione's experiments had already weakened the Omen Killer considerably. Its classic slow and fast attacks still remained, but its strength, vitality, and reaction speed were reduced. With a few more attempts, it would not be significantly harder than the Great Tree Guardian. That weakening would not last forever, however. The next foes, Grafted Scion and Godric, would demand raw force. On the school front, there was major news. After months of breeding work by Newt and many other magizoologists, the ghost owls had been initially domesticated. While Hermione and the others were eating in the Great Hall, translucent owls drifted in from outside and dropped newspapers onto the tables. The Daily Prophet from Malfoy Manor had paid for a ghost owl delivery and sent several of their latest issues to Hogwarts. The Prophet's front page showed the ghost owl's large, cat-like head and round, searching eyes and offered an eager article about the new magical species. The writer dreamed aloud of a return to pre-war postal convenience and listed subscription channels. Any subscriber would receive daily paper delivery by Ghost Owl. The service, however, was expensive. With paper already costly and postage added, very few students could afford a subscription. Hermione, though, sat on the governor's table and needed first-hand Wizarding World news. Even if the Prophet was biased, she paid to subscribe, despite worrying that transparent birds might leave droppings on the dining table. Malfoy Manor's promotion caused a stir, especially among the older wizards who remembered Owl Post. Many companions lost to radiation stirred memory and tears when the ghost owls appeared. Letters flooded in asking how to buy or breed them, but Newt and his team had limited capacity. They had already given chicks and birds to most of the major magical schools, everyone except the Institute in Japan, flattened by a bomb, and Koldov Storets, which had been relocated and absorbed by Durmstrang. Professors had joined Newt in North America to help with domestication so that international magical exchange might one day revive. Unlike Malfoy Manor, the schools were cautious about opening a wide postal service. In a world that was still dangerous, letting the owls fly freely across campus could compromise secrecy. Like owls of old, they could find their recipients and potentially lead enemies to the school. McGonagall therefore asked Hagrid and Lockhart to implement strict customs checks to ensure any ghost owl entering Hogwarts was free of harm. She also strengthened the school's protective barrier, leaving only a small weak point high above, so the ghost owls could only descend after passing through the radiation cloud. Unless an enemy could survive that cloud and distinguish birds whose plumage blended with it, there was no safe way to track Hogwarts by owl flight. These were temporary measures. Once Hogwarts returned to the Highlands, with the world already aware of its general location, secrecy would be a lower priority. With the castle's power restored, few would dare provoke it. Beyond newspapers, letters remained the owl's primary use. On Valentine's Day, Lockhart discovered that firsthand. Dozens of love letters arrived for him in a chaotic storm of transparent wings. The ghost owls trashed the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom with howler-like declarations, feathers, and droppings. For once, the unruffled, vain professor looked genuinely flustered, and Ron and Harry, ever keen to raise a chorus of mischief, intercepted letters and read them aloud until Lockhart's face went the color of a monkey's behind. Some girls had indeed confessed to him in earnest. Lockhart promptly handed their letters to McGonagall. A pile of heavy essays would, she decided, be an appropriate cure for romantic excess. 152. All under observation. After Fleur made inquiries with Beauxbatons, Madame Maxime didn't mince words. She sent the courier back with the Thunderbird tail feathers. The price had been high. Even in North America, healthy adult Thunderbirds were rare. Most of the cost for the second batch of perfume sprays had already been covered. Hermione didn't pocket the rest. That was Hogwarts' share. She'd ordered 4 feathers at once, even buying Harry and Ron's portions in advance. That meant each of them owed her well over 100 galleons on average, making Hermione not only their teacher, but also their creditor. Still, she hadn't felt the second heartbeat yet, so she wasn't in a hurry to hand a tail feather to Neville. She had deliberately avoided giving them to Harry or Ron. She didn't trust them not to trigger the feather while she was halfway through a meal. Their recent expedition to the Forbidden Lands had not gone smoothly. After learning spells and techniques from Hermione, the boys had dispatched the Omen Killer quickly enough. But when they tried their luck at Stormvale Castle, they found the new skills unfamiliar in practice. The castle was full of traps and malice and allowed little time to react. Their performance in later forays was worse than it had been back in Limgrave. Soldiers lurked behind doors and kicked intruders off cliffs. Stormhawks, swift and deadly, had talons replaced by blades. Heavily armored knights waited in dark rooms, slamming doors to trap their prey, and pumpkinhead soldiers towered nearly as high as Hagrid. Still, repeated explorations uncovered hidden routes, and Ron officially met his nemesis, the Crucible Knight. At Hermione's suggestion, he'd asked Harry and Neville to watch from the side, claiming he wanted to practice parrying with the knight. The result nearly split them with laughter. Even so, the 3 of them had no idea what lay further underground: the terrifying human face, the rotten tree spirit, the deep pit filled with corpses, or the mist-locked door that led to the grafted Godric. Their progress remained largely on the outskirts. The worst of the cold had passed, and weather hinted at a slow thaw. The castle had crossed the Pyrenees and re-entered French territory. Hermione was still wondering how long the Caro siblings could keep themselves hidden when Sky Eye sent an unexpected warning. She had just finished her evening animagus routine and was sitting by the window when a vision came. Like an overturned palette, the scene was smeared with blurred oil paints, but because Sky Eye was active, the picture was a little clearer than usual. 2 masses of dark green took humanoid form. This time, Hermione could make out the outlines of a man and a woman. They stood close together, while the man paced anxiously. Beneath his green-shaded bulk, streaks of orange and yellow flickered like restless embers. "It's almost March. Lord Voldemort's mission has seen no progress," he fretted. "Do you feel it? The mark is growing hotter." He rolled up his sleeve. Where his arm should have been, the dark mark gleamed black and perfect, starkly clear even in the blurred vision. "For half a year, we have only tracked the castle's movement through the cursed object's link. Lockhart ran into some trifling danger, but it's hardly worth reporting." He scratched his scalp. "As Voldemort's patience thins, it could be next month, or tomorrow, When that mark drains out our lives, there will be no room for argument or excuses. Voldemort's grip was unmistakable. The dark mark was less a symbol than an instrument of judgment. Life and death rested in his hand. Why, Hermione wondered, did these once noble wizards still submit to such evil? Before she could think it through, she heard Alecto's calm voice. "Don't worry, brother. Everything is part of our plan." She laughed softly. "These 2 months laying low have not been wasted. At least we've confirmed Hogwarts' complacency. Draco hasn't been taken. He's just been terrified by himself. Those flowers in the greenhouse are very naive. Perhaps it's time we show ourselves, give him some confidence, some guidance, an Easter egg." She produced 2 indistinct objects and set them on the table. "Look, 2 portkeys. I've organized the plan." Hermione tried to focus on the portkeys, but Sky Eye's vision didn't make them entirely clear. Amicus leaned closer, curious. "So we're finally moving? When?" "We'll reach out to Draco during their next outdoor practical class. Judging by past frequency, it shouldn't be long, though the action may come a bit later," Alecto replied. "Oh, and you didn't kill that Dobby, did you?" she asked casually. "Not yet. He has only 1 breath left," Amicus said without enthusiasm. In their long, dull days, tormenting Dobby had been amusement. Heal him before meeting Draco. If he dies, that boy might get emotional. 2 portkeys, 1 for Lockhart, 1 for that Granger girl. "Have young Malfoy coax them over," Alecto said. "You take the basilisk for Lockhart. I'll take the little girl," she sneered. "Watch out. I've heard that girl wounded the basilisk last year," Amicus warned. "I've looked into it. Her shining stone magic is strong, but it seems to need time to charge and can't be fired at will," Alecto replied confidently. "Otherwise, Lily Potter wouldn't have had to shelter her and the other children in that Muggle pub." She had read a witness's memory. In her view, Hermione Granger might be a prodigy, but she wasn't fully grown. Deny her preparation time and powerful magic, and she was just another child to be killed. "So they're planning how to kill me," Hermione thought. No wonder Sky Eye snapped awake. She felt no fear, only a mild, bitter amusement. "Where do your portkeys lead? Are they stable? What's the escape road?" Amicus asked, pragmatism intruding even into cruelty. "The Verdun Gorge," Alecto said triumphantly. "I chose it carefully. Any farther, and the portkeys could become unstable. Your key goes to the bottom of the gorge. The narrow terrain and the rolling smoke will stop a hippogriff from flying out. We'll lay anti-apparition wards in advance. The basilisk will have its fun with Lockhart down there. Mine will wait at the cliff's edge above. Hermione Granger will be able to hear her beloved professor scream as he's crushed and devoured piece by piece." Right now, Hogwarts is moving north, while the gorge sits in southeastern France. We can finish everything before the other professors, or Dumbledore, arrive, then head east into Italy. They won't catch us. "Very well, let's do it your way." The vision faltered. The oil paints bled back together into indistinct swirls, and the scene vanished like mist. 153. Everything is ready. Without hesitation, after telling the 3 boys to go to the room of requirement on their own, Hermione went to the Transfiguration office to find Professor McGonagall, and the 2 of them then entered the headmaster's office together. "The Verdun Gorge?" McGonagall frowned. "That's not a good place." Hermione watched her confusion and explained. "There's a rumor about an important goblin cave there. The Wizengamot used fiendfire to burn the entire gorge." McGonagall's face grew grimmer. "The fire supposedly burned for an entire year. Even now, the underground caves still erupt with fiendfire from time to time. The black smoke that gathers in the gorge is lethally toxic. Breathing large amounts can be disastrous. As one of the deepest gorges in the world, it's taken on another name, Hell's Mouth." Hermione wasn't frightened. The Caro siblings certainly have a taste for dramatic locations. A hellish trial, how fitting. McGonagall did not share her easy tone. "Did you see a basilisk?" she asked. "That's extremely strange. A basilisk can't just move with the castle without being noticed." Hermione remembered the Sky Eye's glimpse, blurry, with no clear moving shapes besides the Caro siblings themselves. "Maybe they moved the basilisk to the gorge long ago," she said. "You never know." She didn't dwell on the detail. Dumbledore sat in thought for a long moment before speaking. His opinion hadn't been offered yet. McGonagall pursed her lips and asked, "Are you certain you want to go ahead with this?" A 1,000-year-old mutated basilisk, two notorious dark wizards, and a cursed object wired for Lockhart. Hermione began. You could catch them off guard during the next outdoor practical class if they come looking for Draco, McGonagall finished. Hermione was about to argue when Dumbledore smiled and patted McGonagall's shoulder. You worry too much, he said lightly, and offered the small candy on the desk to McGonagall, an old habit of his, though he could no longer eat it himself. Isn't everything within our control? The Sky Eye is an unfair advantage, he sighed, but then brightened. Luckily, it's on our side this time. He counted on his fingers for McGonagall. The enemy's objectives and movements, when and how and where they will strike, those are all visible to us. And how strong are we? McGonagall asked. We have one of the greatest white wizards, certainly one of the best in the world, Hermione said with a smile. Dumbledore chuckled. Oh, thank you, child. But besides me, we also have our top professors. We possess a powerful source of energy, the like of which the likes of Voldemort or Grindelwald would think twice about facing. McGonagall's brow tightened. And yet you want a young professor and a few children to face it. That is the point of the trial, isn't it? Dumbledore replied, looking at her over his half-moon spectacles. We can quietly take over the Carrow siblings' anti-apparition barrier, remain hidden, and observe everything. That way we keep the proceedings within a controlled range. Hermione chimed in. You don't know how much Harry and the others have improved lately. I truly think they'll surprise you, and Professor Potter, when the time comes. She smiled faintly. If you both trust me, let me make the arrangements for the trial. The two heads exchanged glances. Under Dumbledore's encouraging look, McGonagall finally nodded, though it was a reluctant motion. Perhaps because the Carrow siblings were preparing their move, Hermione felt an urgency she couldn't ignore. It wasn't solely the threat of the Death Eaters or the Basilisk. She wanted to finish her Animagus training before the trial so she wouldn't have to worry about Neville suddenly deciding to ignite the tail feather during the outdoor practical class. If that happened, she would have to rush back to the castle and drink the potion, leaving the others unprotected. Her practice had accelerated. She'd been working spells on her heart every day and could already faintly hear a heartbeat. Confident now, she found Neville and handed him the Thunderbird tail feather. Really? Whenever I feel like it? Any time? Neville asked, uneasy at the responsibility. As long as you're present, Hermione said. Trust your intuition, even if it's during class or some other situation. She wanted to add that he should avoid igniting it during the outdoor practical lesson, but she couldn't. The final step of the Animagus process required randomness. James and the others' modifications had removed the need to wait for a thunderstorm, which could take forever, so introducing human timing risked spoiling the result. Neville carefully put the long feather away, unsure when he might suddenly decide to light it. Everything must go smoothly, Harry said, half envious. Once you complete your human transformation, you can guide us. Hermione's progress had been fast and steady, no complications. You just don't trust us to pull off a surprise attack, so you saddled Neville with the feather, Ron said, bluntly pointing out the issue. Hey, Neville, why not wait until the leaving feast to burn it, so she misses a big meal? He added with a mischievous grin. Maybe not. It won't be you getting beaten afterward, Neville replied, still sensible. Hermione looked at Ron as if appraising him. Mr. Weasley, why don't you guess who will help you burn the feather when you learn Animagus? Ron froze. At that point, only Hermione had completed the transformation, so it was likely she'd be the one to help. You wouldn't want to be halfway using the toilet and suddenly see a rain cloud appear outside the door, would you? Hermione said ominously. Ron shuddered at the image of racing to the room of requirement with his trousers half down. Okay, I was wrong. Let Neville decide. He surrendered. But Hermione, haven't you been curious what your Animagus will be? Ron asked. Hermione shrugged. Generally, an Animagus and a Patronus are linked, but I can't summon a corporeal Patronus yet. She paused, then explained, Uncle James and the others tinkered with the Animagus process, which caused some transformed animals to have mutations. For example, Xiao Aixing's flying squirrel form, an ordinary flying squirrel couldn't fly that high or that far. As for Uncle James's stag and Sirius's black dog, perhaps because they didn't use mandrake leaves soaked in mooncalf dung extract, those didn't change. That's disgusting. I'd rather wait until the full moon. Those few days aren't worth it, Ron said, wrinkling his nose. With the trio taken care of and the outdoor practical class approaching, Hermione also went to inform Lockhart and Draco that the Caro siblings were about to act. Lockhart was easy. This time, he only needed to keep up his performance of knowing nothing. Draco, however, had a real test. He had to protect his thoughts from Alecto and absolutely mustn't let her probe his mind with legilimency again. "Why don't you just get me a brain closure helmet?" Draco asked, grimacing. Hermione refused outright. Alecto's legilimency, while troublesome, was weaker than that of a natural legilimens. She couldn't casually read the memories of house elves or truly powerful wizards, and mostly bullied younger and less experienced minds. According to Lockhart, Draco's progress in brain closure techniques was rapid. He could even fabricate false memories to some extent now. "Oh, by the way, Professor," Hermione asked Lockhart casually, "what will the next outdoor practical class be about?" "Measles," Lockhart said with a smile. "We'll finish what we were interrupted on last time." Because they were back at Hogwarts, Lockhart simply reused the outdoor locations he hadn't used the last time. The only lessons that had run here before were for the second years, who'd been allowed to see the measles. For everyone else, classes had been canceled when the basilisk was discovered. Returning to the old spot, the students were excited. Most of them hadn't managed to stroke the measles last time and were determined to make up for it. Only Lockhart, Draco, and Hermione shared a tacit understanding that this class had another purpose. "I covered the basics of approaching measles last time," Lockhart announced loudly, "so most of this lesson is for you to practice. Come and get your chalk, then spread out. There are lots of measle groups, so take your time." He made a show of leaving plenty of space, deliberately creating an opening for Draco to act alone. Hermione volunteered that she'd already mastered the techniques and would wander the area, shaking off Harry and the others. In truth, she slipped, turned invisible, and kept close enough to protect the boy without being seen. Lockhart's setup was too obvious, and Draco would be watched by everyone if she stayed in plain sight. Draco, however, didn't know that. Fewer people knowing was, in his mind, safer. Even if his brain closure technique were breached, the less the enemy could probe, the better. Nervous and uneasy, he forced himself to look defeated. He returned to the narrow crevice where he had first met the Caro siblings, having deliberately put on a pointed wizard's hat that day to press his blonde hair down, if only as a placebo to blunt legilimency. He called out softly, trying to sound abandoned. "Dobby? Mr. Caro? Miss Caro?" No answer came. He sat on a large rock, picked up a pebble, and tossed it into the crevice. The stone rolled and clattered with an empty echo. "Because of your stupidity, the cursed object was found, and you, along with us, almost got discovered." A cold male voice spoke from behind him. Draco turned and saw Amicus Caro holding a battered, weak Dobby. "Little master, you weren't caught. Thank goodness," Dobby croaked, struggling to lift his lids. His body was bruised and scarred. Draco felt a furious, inexplicable heat at the sight. Although Dobby was only a house elf, the elf's suffering and still continued concern for him touched something in Draco. Some small warmth he hadn't felt all year. He spoke before he could stop himself. "What did you do to him? I've been cooperating with you, haven't I?" A laugh answered him. Alecto Caro had appeared at some point and now walked into the crevice, smiling the fake, constrained smile she always used. She tossed a small booklet into Draco's hands as if fulfilling a promise. "Although you didn't hide the cursed object well, and our plan failed, out of contractual courtesy, here, Cruciatus Curse, Spells and Technique." Her tone was sweetly mocking. Draco stared at the bright red inked pages, trying to steady his breath and keep his mind clear so the brain closure technique wouldn't slip. Alecto leaned in, her voice a silk-wrapped barb. "Since when did pureblood nobles start caring about house elves?" Amicus's laugh was rougher. "Because of his loyalty? Or some useless pity?" Alecto went on. "Do you realize these filthy half-breeds only obey because of the mark the wizards put on their blood? If they had a choice, do you think they'd choose to be ordered about?" She stepped closer and patted Draco's shoulder with false gentleness. All that so-called loyalty, so-called obedience, it's just a warped obedience under blood-bound contracts. Maybe deep down he'd rather you were dead. Maybe then he would be a free house elf. Dobby is loyal, the elf began in a high, pleading voice. Shut up! Amicus struck him in the back of the head. The elf's words cut off. Alecto giggled. Magic twists a mind so easily, let alone a house elf. The imperious curse, what a marvelous invention. She pushed the implication forward, daring Draco to deny it. Ask him, as his master, ignoring the contract, would he really choose to be your family's house elf? Amicus roughly slung Dobby down at Draco's feet. The elf tried to rise, but couldn't. Draco's face hardened. Alecto met his eyes with an encouraging look. He took a breath and forced himself to speak, testing both Dobby and his own resolve. Dobby, I command you to tell the truth. Are you loyal? Dobby blinked up at him, voice thin. Dobby is, of course, loyal. Amicus and Alecto burst into delighted laughter. Draco's jaw tightened. No lies. Say what's in your heart. Do you like being the Malfoy family's house elf? Dobby opened his mouth as if to refuse, then faltered. Answer me, Dobby. Say it. This is a command, Draco pressed. The house elf's breathing grew rapid. He looked at the three humans like a trapped thing. His large eyes pleaded, but the compulsion was stronger than his fear. He had to obey the command, even when it ran against the brand in his blood. Finally, without the soft, measured cadence he usually used, the elf cried out, Dobby does not like obeying his master's commands. Dobby does not like killing people. Dobby does not like lending and cheating. Dobby does not like the Malfoy family. For years, under Lucius Malfoy's orders, Dobby had been forced into acts that had torn at his conscience, guarding Gringotts' treasures, enforcing cruel contracts and usurious loans, and later, following a command that led to killing. He had hoped, once, that being sent into the radiation by the trap meant he might die and be spared further wrongdoing, but no one had ever asked him what he wanted. No one listened. The Carrows laughed until their eyes shone. Dobby's voice shifted, broke into self-hate. He began to bang his head against the ground, each strike tearing him further. He screamed over and over, Dobby is a bad elf. Dobby should die. Dobby should die. No one intervened. They let him break himself. Draco felt something inside him snap and then go painfully quiet. All the small, genuine things he had felt, the little warmth when Dobby still cared, the pride that he had fooled Alecto even for a moment, were gone, shoved away by the elf's words. For an instant, he couldn't tell if what he felt was anger or shame or grief. He could think with clinical clarity that he must keep his brain closure technique intact, but his thoughts felt detached, hovering above the room as if he had been hollowed out. Then he moved without really deciding to. He pulled off his pointed wizard's hat and with a hoarse voice threw it into Dobby's arms. The elf, spent and bleeding, clutched at the hat like a talisman. Draco's voice dropped low and steady. You are free, Dobby. In the name of the heir of the Malfoy family, I release you from your contract. You are free. 155. What is freedom? Dobby stared at the hat in his hands, astonished. He had been given clothing personally bestowed by Lord Voldemort, and he was free. Alecto watched, privately pleased. Her rhetoric had worked. By degrees, by careful nudging, the child of Malfoy was sliding into the darkness. He had cut off the path his father had left for him. By doing so, he pushed himself toward the Green Flame Party. Through legitimacy, she had watched a burning heart go cold. Sadness, betrayal, and suppressed anger boiled into a bitter porridge, and the boy drank it slowly. A respectable awakening, she murmured, applauding Draco in her thoughts. These filthy misfits cannot be trusted, not like the great Lord Voldemort, who will share immortality and power with us. She hugged Draco and whispered, We know you didn't mean to find the cursed object, and your hesitation was only caution. Now that we're back, it's time for the second operation. She looked at Draco's bowed head and tried to make her eyes appear soft and sincere. Child, you don't have to do much. You only need to lead Lockhart and Granger to the place we arranged during the next practical class and make them touch the portkey we left. Draco didn't dare meet her. Eye contact would only strengthen her legitimacy. He kept his thoughts guarded and bowed his head. Granger, will she be killed too? He stammered. Alecto saw the fear, but that was expected. Any child who learned a classmate might be killed would feel unease. It was empathy. She stroked Draco's head, feeling him tremble. Don't be afraid, good child. You are different from them. You have talent and ambition, don't you? Hogwarts is a greenhouse, not for you. The forests of Albania will be your paradise. The Cruciatus was only your first gift. After the next practical class, when you complete the task we've given, you will not even need to return to Hogwarts. We will take you to meet the great Lord Voldemort. He will teach you advanced dark arts and share the secret of eternal life. Malfoy will rise again in a way those who looked down on you could never imagine. Her temptation was subtle, and Draco seemed persuaded. His body stopped trembling. How do I contact you? How do I find the portkey you put? Alecto smiled. Her jagged wand traced the back of his hand, and a black, snake-like mark appeared and faded. This revealing spell will trigger at the proper distance. Follow it, and you will find what we left. It'll be very obvious. Draco swallowed. He did not know whether curses were hidden among her assurances. Okay, I promise. What a good child, Alecto purred, delighted. Controlling others' thoughts without using the imperious curse was her favorite sport. I have been away too long. If I don't make a move soon, others will grow suspicious. Go then, my child. We await your good news. Draco turned. He glanced at Dobby, still stunned on the ground, and said coldly, You can dispose of it as you please. It has no use to me anymore. Then he left without a hint of regret. Amicus raised an eyebrow. In that case, let's kill it. A green light blinked at the tip of his wand, but before he could lift it, Alecto pressed his arm down. For a house elf, abandonment is a cruelty greater than death, she said, looking at Dobby with something like relish. Letting him live but leaving him alone in the wild, that will be far more interesting. They chuckled together like monsters, then apparated away with the sharp crack of departure. The crevice fell silent. Only Dobby remained, sitting on the ground in a daze, the hat clutched to his chest. Dobby is free, he whispered. Unseen by anyone below, at the top of the secluded crevice, the air seemed to clear, and Hermione Granger, Albus Dumbledore, and Minerva McGonagall stood watching. It was not only Hermione who had arrived. Dumbledore and McGonagall had come earlier, too. He did very well, didn't he? Hermione said softly. For his age, to deceive Alecto after only 3 months of learning brain closure technique, that is unexpected, McGonagall sighed. I had prepared to save him. Dumbledore's gaze went down to the house elf. We always judge others by our own minds, he said. This, too, was a trial I set for Draco. And he completed it very well, Hermione agreed. Do you think he truly no longer cares about Dobby? Minerva asked, worried. He acted perfectly. Fear, sorrow, trembling, determination. I'm not sure I could maintain brain closure technique if I were hurt like that. I can't see through him. Hermione was uncertain, too. Perhaps Draco had a natural gift for closing himself off. Such people were difficult to read. Dumbledore seemed to remember something. Those who are good at shutting away themselves are born with a shell. It's hard for ordinary people to get in, but once they're broken through, they are remembered forever. They find brain closure easier. Even natural legilimens struggle to enter them. But perhaps being obsessed with seeing through people is not healthy, Dumbledore continued. As a legilimens, I have always warned myself not to blindly trust magical judgments, not to assume I can know every heart. That would turn me into a monster and make me miserable. The wind moved through the hollow. None of the three felt like speaking more. I think we should go, Hermione said finally. Everything is going according to plan. Oh, and Minerva, find some excuse to examine the mark on Draco's hand discreetly, Dumbledore added. They turned to leave, but Hermione stopped and hesitated. I want to speak with Dobby. Dumbledore nodded quietly, satisfied, and he and McGonagall went on. Hermione, leaning on her staff, descended into the crevice. At the sound of movement, Dobby lifted his head. For a moment he thought Draco had returned. Then he saw someone else. Hermione Granger. His voice shook. Though Dobby prone to kindness, his recent attempt at assassination, he had been beaten badly for it, had left him frightened of this little witch. Dobby doesn't have to kill you anymore. Please don't come closer. Hermione smiled and shook her head. I'm not here to trouble you. She sat a respectful distance away and looked at him with gentle curiosity. I'm just curious about what you're feeling right now, she said. Are you happy to have freedom, or are you sad because you've been abandoned? Dobby stared blankly. Weak and filthy, he could only sit in the dirt. He did not understand how Hermione could know what had just happened. Dobby wants freedom, he mumbled. But Dobby knows it's wrong. Dobby shouldn't want freedom. Then Dobby wouldn't have been abandoned. Hermione watched him, patient. It seemed a belief ran deep among many house elves. Freedom was wrong. Servitude and loyalty were noble. But no matter what, she said, you are free now. You can do anything you want without having to obey another's orders. That answer confused Dobby more. Anything Dobby wants to do? But Dobby doesn't know what to do. Is this freedom? No, Hermione said, meeting his large, worried eyes. Freedom isn't just doing whatever you want. It's being able to say no to things you don't want to do. Perhaps a start would be to try living a life that belongs only to you and refuse the things you do not want. 156. Talk. The outdoor practice ended without incident. Draco had won the initial trust of the Caro siblings. The next session wouldn't be for another month. That time would be the final sprint for Harry and the others, but Hermione had no intention of telling them what they would face, nor did she plan to warn Lockhart. Letting him walk into the basilisk problem alone seemed more useful. Unexpected situations revealed a person's true level. Deep down, she was oddly angry. The Lockhart she had admired was not the man she'd met, but a manufactured persona. It felt like a betrayal. Though Lockhart hadn't set out to deceive anyone, he'd built a mask to hide his painful past. He'd hurt only himself. A real personality buried for years was no healthy way to live. Hermione felt stifled with an anger that had nowhere to go. Part of her resembled a little girl who had followed an idol only to discover it was a virtual creation. For a moment, her house had collapsed. So Draco received focused occlumency lessons, while Harry and the others endured the meditation basin in the Forbidden Land. Lockhart, meanwhile, went about his days blissfully unaware, convinced he and Hermione could resolve the matter quietly and without the staff noticing. He daydreamed about writing a book in a few years, The Sound of the Wind, My Secret War at Hogwarts, when it was all over. He was destined to be disappointed. Dumbledore and McGonagall were humoring him as if performing for a show. After the basilisk was killed, they would report everything to the other professors. Whatever dignity Lockhart imagined would be lost in a public unmasking. In Transfiguration, McGonagall had examined Draco in private and confirmed the mark was a harmless tracking spell. Alecto, it seemed, had avoided mixing a curse in, perhaps afraid that would draw immediate attention. Hermione considered telling Professor Lily the truth. Lily's son faced real danger, and keeping it from his mother felt excessive. A school had no right to test students and professors this way, neither morally nor contractually. Hermione was only Harry's classmate, but Dumbledore seemed less burdened by conscience. Age and long struggle had made him willing to use people as instruments. Indeed, it's unjust, he admitted. But who told me I'm a dead man? Any future complaints and blame, leave them to me. He shrugged. In a sense, Gellert and I are the same. We both thought we could sacrifice others for what we believed was greater. His pale eyes were calm as a lake. The future of this school, the future of the world. Our generation ruined much of it, so I have a duty to rebuild. Even if I cannot, at least I can cultivate those who might. This is my responsibility, because I failed to save the world. Hermione understood him more deeply then. The old man's heart was full of guilt and self-reproach. Every death, every war, every tragedy was for him proof of his failure to stop Grindelwald. Not for glory, not for status, but out of a desperate wish to return the world to what it should have been. Ghosts are obsessive. Dumbledore had wrestled with life and death for half a century. Every day in that half-century, every crime Grindelwald committed afterward tortured him. Rebuilding everything had become his obsession. Perhaps he didn't need Hermione's ritual. His obsession alone would keep him from moving on. For such a ghost, if a trial could accelerate the successor's growth, he would use any means, regardless of his right to do so. When Hermione told him about a ritual with only slightly better than even odds that could restore him to his peak at the cost of true death, he was ready to burn himself for it. To him, the world's rebuilding justified everything, including himself. During my years as a ghost, Dumbledore said softly, I visited all the wizarding leaders who stood with us. Some haven't seen me for years. Some are dead and have successors. I am disappointed, he added wearily. Most are simply surviving. Some have become what they once despised. Hermione wanted to protest that Godric's Hollow had done well, though perhaps it was an exception. Many settlements had no single leader. Their matters were decided collaboratively. She hadn't seen most of them, but Dumbledore's discontent suggested life there was not much better than at Malfoy Manor. They always have difficulties, too many troublesome things, and I give them time after time. Sometimes I even wonder, was Gellert right? He said. McGonagall pressed her lips together. She wanted to speak but held back. But I cannot forget how Ariana died. Our radicalism killed her. Gellert's radicalism killed many more. This keeps me lingering outside the door of fate, Dumbledore admitted. Perhaps that is why people no longer trust me. I am not a qualified leader. He sighed and looked at Hermione. Yet your arrival has brought new life to this castle, even to the wizarding world. The girl who saved Hogwarts in her first year, who published groundbreaking work on shining stone magic, who has held on to her inner self instead of succumbing to easy power, perhaps change can begin with you. We old ones should remove obstacles. I'm sorry, Professor, that you must bear this because of my stubbornness, Hermione said earnestly. She realized another difference between herself and many here. She didn't carry rigid moral doctrines. Her logic of good and evil was simple and self-centered. She helped the weak and the kind and punished the cruel because she needed inner clarity more than moral perfection. In the Forbidden Land, everyone acted as judge and executioner. No one questioned whether they had the right to decide life and death because everyone did the same. Excessive moral scruples there made progress impossible. Wizard civilization had preserved more of those scruples. Society, schools, families still anchored at least some ethics. McGonagall and Lily, who had grown up through Reconstruction, held themselves to high moral standards. Even Dumbledore, ruthless when necessary, was checked by past regrets. Hermione, from her own background, instinctively thought like a finger maiden in the Forbidden Land, arranging paths to strength for the tarnished. Her training had never included the possibility that the tarnished might refuse strength. In that world, if you did not want to become stronger, you simply died. When McGonagall hesitated, her immediate instinct matched the thinking Hermione knew from the Wasteland. If you do not know how strong they are, test them in battle. She arranged trials for everyone, calibrated to what she called challenging. As a finger maiden, that was Hermione's talent. Your self-reflection makes me seem a rigid old woman, McGonagall said with a thin smile, straightening her face as she joked. Then she sighed. As you said, perhaps what we do is not glorious, more like the hidden hand in knightly tales. But the world is changing daily. 50 years ago, becoming an animagus was a rare gift, 1 in 1,000. Now, every year, more children apply for human transfiguration. She glanced at Hermione. After each class, she asked about her progress. Change accelerates. Even second years are nearing their animal forms. We must let go of the past. Change brings pain, and that is our burden to bear. In a harder world, let us be the unfeeling villains. They all smiled at one another. In the headmaster's office, the portraits of former headmasters were silent, as they had been for many years. Perhaps their counsel no longer fit this era. 157. Change in Self. The conversation with the two headmasters had given Hermione a deeper understanding of her own heart. Lately, while practicing her daily spells, she could clearly hear a second heartbeat. It was strong and powerful, but unlike the textbook descriptions, the sound carried a distant, echoing quality. It wasn't so much a heartbeat as the hollow clink of a stone tapping the wall of an empty cave, clear and far away. She didn't know what to make of it. She went to ask Professor McGonagall, but got no definitive answers. Her body was perfectly normal, and there was no abnormality in her animagus progression. James and the others improved human transfiguration, McGonagall said, which can result in benign changes to your animal form. I don't think this is necessarily a bad sign. For once, McGonagall didn't seem worried. In transfiguration, she trusted her own judgment. Hermione returned to the library, rifling through Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and several animal reference books, but none mentioned any creature whose heartbeat sounded like a stone. In the end, she gave up. She didn't feel unwell, McGonagall was unconcerned, and so she would proceed as planned. Whatever she became, she would accept it. Far more of her curiosity was occupied by Neville. Ever since he had taken the Thunderbird feather she'd given him, he seemed to have forgotten about it entirely. He went to lessons, did his homework, ate, and then sat through the meditation basin with his usual awkward patience. Hermione expected him to burst into flames at any moment, yet he remained unhurried. She began to suspect he wasn't carrying the feather at all, until, every time she asked, Neville produced it from his pocket without hesitation. "You're not actually planning to wait until the leaving feast, are you?" she asked once. "I just haven't figured out when it's right," he said earnestly, as if he truly were weighing the moment. Fortunately, he hadn't been able to wait forever. During Charms class, Neville had been paired with Siamis to practice the cheering charm when Finnegan did whatever Finnegan does. A huge fireball skimmed Neville's face and shot toward the ceiling. Neville himself was unharmed, but the Thunderbird feather in his pocket caught alight. "Oh my goodness, Neville, you picked a great time!" Ron gaped as the chubby boy flapped helplessly at the burning feather. Hermione, watching the small rain cloud gathering and the thunder beginning to roll within it, didn't hesitate. She stood up and asked Professor Flitwick for permission to leave. Many of the staff already knew she was working on her animagus, so she was allowed to go without fuss. She told Dobby to inform McGonagall and Lily, and with her wand, she steered the rain cloud ahead of her and hurried off. As she left, she could still hear Flitwick exclaiming in admiration, "These students are extraordinary. She's only in her second year." When she reached the room of requirement, she opened the dark, private chamber that only she could find. Inside, a single crystal bottle sat on a shelf. A small amount of blood-red potion had formed within it, exactly as it should. "Good. No problems," she breathed, relief flooding her. The odd heartbeat had worried her, but the potion was right. The door opened again, and Dobby hurried in, followed by McGonagall and Lily. They had left their classes and told their students to work on their own. McGonagall took one look at the room and shook her head. "No, this won't do. If you turned into an elephant or a whale, you'd be crushed." At a gesture from her, the room of requirement expanded. The space stretched outward until it rivaled the size of a Quidditch pitch. The high ceiling dissolved into darkness. The single rain cloud drifted in the center like a black puff of cotton, lightning flickering inside it. McGonagall turned to Hermione. "How are you feeling? Remember, keep calm, don't resist or panic. Embrace the change." Hermione nodded. "After you drink the potion, you'll see your animagus form. There will be intense pain, but that's normal." She repeated the key points, not trusting herself to trust anyone in the moment. Lily squeezed her hand. "Even a reckless idiot like James managed it. You'll be fine." Hermione smiled at them both. "I'm ready." She pressed her wand to her chest and spoke the words with practiced precision. "Amato, animo, animato, animagus." She drained the crystal bottle in a single gulp. Instantly, the strange, stone-like heartbeat swelled until it filled her chest. Every inch of her body, every hair on her skin became a channel for searing pain. Her heartbeat and that distant, empty thumping merged and tangled, as though two drums were pounding to see which could dominate. Soon she could hear nothing but the two rhythms. McGonagall and Lily watched with taut faces, fearing an accident, but Hermione's endurance held. The pain was fierce but not breaking. A ball of light emerged in the center of her vision, the sign of her animagus form. Yet no matter how she strained, she could not make out the shape within the brightness. "I must get closer," she told herself, and forced her will toward the light. It grew until her vision was a blinding white. The next instant, she seemed to have left her body and stood upon a gently rippling water. Overhead hung a huge full moon, rimmed with a thick halo as if it might drop from the sky at any moment. She recognized the place at once, the mental realm Lockhart had described in his accounts, distorted by his usual bluster. Becoming an animagus must open this inner world. Neither professors nor James had mentioned that part. Beneath the moon, a little girl stood, astonishingly like her. "Hello," the girl said with a bright, tilted smile. "Hi, me from another world." Hermione stared. The girl had Hermione's fluffy brown hair, slightly protruding front teeth, and a round, almost childlike face. You are? Hermione asked, frowning. She had never seen herself in this way. I am Hermione Granger, the girl replied. Before you came, this body belonged to me. Hermione felt something inside her tighten. Impossible. Our souls merged ages ago. I carry the original body's memories, her feelings, her joys and sorrows. You can't exist separately. You could say that. The girl tilted her head. But I'm the last trace of Hermione Granger that remained. If you hadn't started your animagus, I probably wouldn't have shown up. In fact, I came here to say goodbye to you. The girl stood on the surface of the water, as if it were solid. Hermione watched, noticing how different this version of her was. The same brown eyes, but younger, bright with endless curiosity. She tried to look confident, but Hermione could see her unease in the way she clasped her hands behind her back. I'm going to disappear and merge with you, the girl said. Her eyes shone, but there was no bitterness or regret. Thank you. If it weren't for you, I would never have seen these wonderful spells, never have seen this magnificent world. Hermione asked quietly, You don't hate me for occupying your body? The girl shook her head gently. No, I was already dying back then. She looked up at the moon, as if remembering things. Grandpa, Grandma, my mother's parents, they all fled from England. People said farther east there was a place where the Muggles had a strong government, where they didn't fear wizards or magic, where Muggles could live well with technology. They kept going east and east, but they never reached that place. People starved or froze or fell ill along the way. My grandparents were no different. In the end, only my father and mother were left. They couldn't walk anymore, so they stopped and formed a settlement with other people who couldn't travel any further. That's where my parents had me. The two of them stood face to face like mirrors. I don't remember a lot of those memories unless something brought them back at the end, the little witch said with a smile. But I was always curious about whether there really was a beautiful Muggle country to the east, about what magic is, what wizards are like, until my magic broke loose. I copied my father's medical book into 2 exact copies. That scared them, but it also proved I was a witch. They feared magic and wizards, and they were worried the others in the settlement would kill me if they found out. They planned to escape with me, but where could they run to across that cold, desolate waste? She frowned. I was arrogant. I thought that with what my parents had taught me and with my newly awakened magic, I could survive alone in the wasteland, so I left by myself. But I caught a cold and a fever and passed out, she went on. You know what happened next. The Green Flame Party smashed the door open and slaughtered everyone. My mother died first, then my father, as he tried to carry me away. But I was already dying in his arms. She looked at Hermione. So when you came, there was no one to resist. My soul was weak, and you absorbed me easily. Hermione understood. In an isolated Muggle settlement with no medicine, a serious illness was almost always a death sentence, even if the parents were doctors. So my arrival met no opposition. Your soul was weak, and my transmigrations saved a life, she said, though she couldn't tell whether it had been me from the Age of Stars or the Tarnished who'd arranged it. The girl's gratitude was sincere. I had to thank you. You let my life continue. You're clever and powerful, you know deep magic, and you handle things calmly and surely. You're exactly what I always wanted to be. In her hazy consciousness, everything Hermione did convinced her that Hermione belonged in that body more than she did. Hermione had no answer. She was an adult finger maiden who had died in a humiliating way before she ever met the Tarnished. If she evaluated her life in the Forbidden Land, she could hardly call it perfect. She muttered, thinking of Melina and of someone else's taken Tarnished. If it were me, I certainly wouldn't have let him learn the frenzied flame. Seeing the finger maiden's sudden slump in spirits, the little Hermione patted her on the shoulder. That's enough. I only wanted to see you with my own eyes. Animagus is a rare chance for a wizard to reconnect and gain a new form. I'm sorry that, because of my selfishness, you were brought here without knowing why. She smiled, but her form was already beginning to thin. From now on, I am you. We will be one, never to be separated. Wait, what about my animagus? Hermione blurted. Isn't it right there? The almost transparent girl pointed up toward the sky. A full moon hung above them, silver and soft. The moon? Hermione stared, stunned. Little Granger smiled. She, too, had the Finger Maiden's memories now. From the silver plate-like moon, a familiar torrent of light poured down, like a long river of silver beads flowing into the sea of spirit. The waves it sent through that sea were vast enough to rock the world. The little witch curled her hands and, smiling, waved goodbye as she faded and vanished. Countless new memories rushed into Hermione. In the room of requirement, Lily and Professor McGonagall watched the scene in astonishment. The little witch, who had been doubled over in pain, had floated upward, folded herself like a curl, and become a hazy moon whose clear light chased the darkness from the whole room. "Professor McGonagall, have you ever seen anything like this?" Lily asked, eyes fixed on the moon. McGonagall was momentarily speechless. An animagus. By definition, that's an animal form. She's become a moon. She found it almost unbelievable. Is she still alive? Can she change back? Lily asked, anxious. The mandrake restorative drought she had prepared to interrupt the change already seemed useless. No, this isn't a loss of control. It looks like a benign mutation. McGonagall frowned and concentrated on the magical fluctuations. She and Xiao Aiqing used the same method, but I expected at most an animal manifestation with a touch of magic. The moon rose higher and higher until it nearly touched the ceiling. Its light poured down across the great room, and where McGonagall and the others stood, the glow felt as if a real moon had been brought indoors. Lily cried out, "Do you feel it? The magic! It's coming alive!" They looked down and saw the thin moonlight painting intricate circles of runes across the floor. If Lucius had been present, he would have recognized the pattern, the magic realm array Hermione had carved into the ground when she had bested him. But now the array's scale was enormous, encompassing the area bathed by the moonlight. "There were no accidents," McGonagall said, a mix of wonder and relief in her voice. "This truly is her animagus." Her face broke into a small, wry smile. "Perhaps we ought to make a new category for it, Lunamagus. Although, that does sound a bit like Miss Lovegood. When the original soul of this body finally merged with mine, everything rushed in at once. A flood of the little girl's childhood memories came clear as if carved in glass. Mixed with them was a torrent of light, the new magic the tarnished had sent. The sea of spirit around me dissolved until a single bright moon remained, growing and growing until it swallowed me whole. I curled up inside that moon like a newborn, though neither I nor the moon were physical. We overlapped into a strange in-between state. Spells or blades passing through would feel like passing through light and shadow, unable to harm. I had no eyes, and yet I could see, no mouth, and yet I could speak, no wings, and yet I could fly, no fingers, and yet I could touch with magic. Renala's full moon. The thought flashed through me. Renala's full moon. Renala of the Carrion royal line could call a full moon down to herself. The moon would fly at enemies and dispel any magic it touched. Nye had met a moon guided by Renala, and Rani had her dark moon. A memory guided by Renala revealed another, Renala's twin moons. There was a sister to the full moon queen. The twin moon phase had been completely eclipsed by the sister's power. After the Tarnished became queen, she turned back into the sealed land of shadow and had even wilder adventures. But the Carrion moon magics are, in their normal form, high-level combat spells. The caster briefly becomes a moon disc to cast, then the disc detaches and flies off while the mage returns to themselves. Renala's full moon, Rani's dark moon, even the twin moons, they transformed only at the instant of casting. What I was experiencing was different. The animagus nature of my body had fused with moon magic. The result was something altogether new. I couldn't help wondering, half amused and half grossed out, whether it was really the effect of the moonfolk beast's feces, the leaf stained in that vile muck. For a moment the thought of that leaf didn't repel me so much as intrigue me. Inside the moon, the world beyond felt distant, but I could still hear the two professors talking below. I couldn't answer them. More of my spirit was gathered in the moon. As the moonlight began to etch a vast magic realm on the floor of the room of requirement, my consciousness rose. In that clear, radiant lunar world, knowledge poured into me, magic and the processes that strengthened it, all accelerating like a torrent. Things that would once have left my head throbbing now arrived as if by revelation and caused no fatigue in this form. I absorbed and grew at a terrifyingly fast rate. Names and arts flowed through me. The perfumer's art of combat, incantations of the horned ones, Mesmer's fell flame, Baal the Dread's dragon communion, new lightning spear, and gravity magics. The spiked cursed flower bud saint the land of shadow had rejected, the disgusting rotten incantations of the worm faces, the golden tree incantations hidden by eternal Queen Marika, the Carrion royal family's mentor's finger arts, the teachings of the high priestess Emmer, even the frenzied flame of Midra. There was so much, secrets from the forbidden land I'd never had access to as a finger maiden. Even the shattered mother of fingers and the two fingers who no longer received guidance nearly shattered me again. Those two fingers had been pillars in a worldview I'd trusted for so long. None of it stopped the Animagus's progress. The moon phase machinery just kept running, and my magical power swelled as if this was how things were meant to be. I began to suspect that if I remained in this form, I might, within a few years, dwarf anyone in strength, maybe even Grindelwald. Perhaps eventually I could become a true moon, a magical moon visible to some, a second moon distinct from the real one. What should I call it then? I thought during a brief pause in the flood of knowledge. Renala's full moon, or Nee's dark moon, didn't fit. I remembered the hazy halo around the moon I'd glimpsed in the spirit world and smiled inwardly. Why not call it Hermione's Otsukimi? Like Renala's and Ronnie's magics, my Otsukimi seemed to have room to grow. The dark moon the Tarnished had learned from Nee was legendary. Renala's full moon was high level. My moon held potential too. I would have to explore it. Could this moon, now entwined with my animagus, still detach and fly as the original spells did? I tested it by separating from the moon. More precisely, I transformed back into my human form while my magical power reconstituted into a moon of pure energy. The energy was enormous. At the exact moment of separation, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash through me. Thank goodness for the golden snitch that doubled as a philosopher's stone tucked in my robes. It absorbed and smoothed much of the strain. I could feel how utterly destructive a spell aimed at it would be. Anything cast on that stone would likely dissolve. When I landed, the two professors hurried over. Thank goodness, everything's normal. No extra noses, ears, or legs. McGonagall inspected me formally, though she was clearly rattled. Lily stood beneath the hovering moon and blinked. What is that? Is it a little moon you birthed? I hadn't expected that train of thought. Not exactly. It's one of the functions of my animagus now. It can be used to attack or disorient an enemy. I pointed, and the moon's light dissolved a massive bomb hurtling toward the building. If it had detonated here, it might have torn through the 8th floor. You really gave us a scare, McGonagall said. What happened? Your animagus turned into a moon? I considered for a moment. Maybe it's because of my shining stone magic. It explains why the heartbeat I heard earlier sounded like a stone. The moon itself felt like a huge mass of stone. McGonagall laughed, half exasperated, half relieved. This is baffling, but at least none of it went out of control. You've gained a unique transformation, no longer properly called an animagus. If this had happened decades ago, registering you with the Ministry would have been the biggest story in the wizarding world. Thanks to Grindelwald blowing up the Ministry, I don't have to register and be gawked at, I said. The result was fortunate, if odd. The professors were still concerned about students studying unattended. After confirming I had no lingering effects, they went back to their duties. The whole merging and transformation had taken just over 10 minutes in the outside world. Though to me, the memory of the spirit merge and the Tarnished's new knowledge felt like a long, star-bright instant. After they left, I stayed and experimented in the room of requirement. The golden snitch philosopher's stone fluttered around me, baffled at why its Lord Voldemort, my affectionate nickname for it, had suddenly become a ball many times its size. In the moon form, my thoughts sped up. When I finally fully merged with the original Hermione's memories, many things I'd once only half remembered snapped into focus. My core personality, though, remained the same. Perhaps the big head that had been inside me when I first arrived had already processed most of it. Class ended, and Harry, Ron, and the others rushed in without stopping to eat. They found the moon hanging from the ceiling and the little golden snitch darting around it. Merlin's beard. If a shit-stained leaf can do this, I think I could put up with one, Ron declared solemnly. Hermione, teach me this. Or, does it have to be a moon? Can I turn into a sun? Stars are fine too. I shook my head. I didn't know how the animagus had merged with moon magic. I suspected the tarnished or knee had interfered. Even if I could teach them Renala's full moon, it might not alter their animal forms. Still, with Otsukimi's radiance functioning like a magic realm, I could hang myself in moon form in the room of requirement every night. That alone should speed up the three boys' progress considerably. 160. The growth of the people. Of course, the two professors didn't go around announcing Hermione's animagus form. In fact, with the Ministry of Magic out of the picture, Professor McGonagall had personally helped many students master human transfiguration, but she never revealed anyone's animal form. When it came to keeping secrets, McGonagall was more reliable than the Fidelius charm. Harry, Ron, and Hermione wanted to tell, but they knew how important an animagus's secret was, so they held their tongues. Hermione, since you've finished human transfiguration, when can you teach us? Harry asked, lifting his head from the meditation basin and scratching the back of his neck. He sounded tired. Godric the Grafted is brutal. His axe techniques are like a storm, so fast and so strong. And that's not even everything, Ron put in, lifting his head to complain. After he grafts the dragon head, that massive fire breath, I can't block it on my own. Can we kill him before he cuts his hand off? Neville asked. Hermione looked up from her parchment, surprised by the old-fashioned phrasing. After months of struggle, they had finally broken past Godric's fog gate and were repeatedly challenging the weakest descendant of the Golden Dynasty. They hadn't found the putrid tree spirit hidden underground. It was probably dizzying itself in circles under Stormvale Castle. That spirit counted as a hidden boss and could be, in some ways, tougher than Godric. Hermione had thought of transforming into the moon form recently to give the boys a mind-activating buff while they meditated. But Professor Flitwick's reminder that it was already March hit her. She hadn't started her second paper. Her first paper on Cragshard had gotten some outside feedback. Wizards were puzzled why her new paper focused on a mining magic, but Skyfall magic was far more difficult. Only a handful of wizards had mastered it after 3 months. Finishing Animagus had accelerated Hermione's thinking, though, and in her moon form, she could conceive ideas faster and write confidently. She estimated she could finish the Skyfall magic paper in a week before the next practical class. Your transfiguration is too far behind, she said sternly. Even Harry, who's progressed the fastest, is barely at a third-year level. If I taught you Animagus now, your mums and the professors would string me up. They wouldn't have the heart, Harry muttered. It just feels like we've stalled lately. We've been stuck on Godric too long and haven't found a good way to beat him. Don't look for shortcuts, Hermione answered. Sometimes it isn't that your strategy is wrong, it's that your raw power isn't enough. She glared at Ron. If your shield charm could cover 3 people and resist a weakened dragon breath, you wouldn't be getting knocked out in the same place every time. Then she looked at Harry. If your magical weapon advanced further, maybe, as Neville asked, you could beat him before he cuts his hand off. To prevent any tempting rule-bending, Hermione had insisted that Godric cutting off his hand remain a fixed plot point. They had to watch and couldn't interfere. No provoking the grafted to go berserk and disrupt him. No rushing to the fallen dragon to destroy its head at the start. That had been the Tarnished's pattern, and Hermione wasn't willing to change a single beat. And even if you learn Animagus, she added, pouring cold water on their hopes, what if your animal form is a cockroach or a duck? It might not help much. Looks like we're stuck here for a while, Harry said, scratching his head. At least we need to practice the shield charm until we're proficient. If the 3 of us use it together, maybe we can block the dragon fire. Hermione didn't only discourage them. She also tried to lift their spirits. Your progress has been obvious. In recent practicals, hasn't Draco dropped out of the top 4? Hermione hardly dueled anymore, but she still led every practical class for the 2nd year. First was always Hermione. The next 3 places had been taken by Harry, Ron, and Neville, with Harry and Ron swapping 2nd and 3rd depending on how well Ron's shield parry worked. When he got it right, he could turn the fight and pin Harry down. Neville, despite wielding the Carrion Swiftblade with its devastating cutting power, lacked the proficiency and magical finesse to break past Ron's defense. His weapon was lighter, easier for Ron to parry. His duels with Harry usually ended in defeat because Harry's combat talent was simply that strong. Neville was methodical and slow, rarely making mistakes, but he didn't have Harry's quick instincts. Still, Hermione was optimistic. With Neville's meticulousness, if he built a solid foundation now, he might become a generation-defining sword saint. Draco, who had beaten Neville at the start of the year, had worked hard, staying in the library while others played. By the second year, he had almost mastered the brain closure technique and even managed to deceive Death Eaters, a feat Lockhart praised loudly. He had thought he could at least match Ron, if not Harry, but the gap was obvious. Neville had surpassed him in footwork, breathing, distance control, and spell use. Draco lost without a real fight. Hermione still remembered Draco's expression that day, shock mixed with quiet fury. The second-year Gryffindor trio had even earned a nickname around school, the Lionheart Musketeers. Rare wizards who all fought with melee wands, they were powerful and synchronized. Older students would come to the second-year arena just to watch them practice. Each attack and withdrawal seemed premeditated. They blended melee weapons and spells so fluidly it made defense nearly impossible. "You may not feel it," Hermione said with a smile, "but during your time in the Forbidden Land, you've been in countless life and death struggles. You've actually died more times than I can count. Even without the magic I taught you, your combat experience and battlefield presence have put you far ahead of everyone else."